All right, everybody. Welcome to the Sourcing That Scales expert panel. Today we're going to be talking about traveling and sourcing products to China, all the different things that you need to know, right? Traveling to a different country can be confusing, it can be overwhelming, and that's what we're going to talk about here today. Now, I know a lot of people going through this panel and listening to this call are actually going with us to China on the Sourcing Summit, so this is going to go over a lot of different things about that and kind of what you need to know, what we're going to be doing for you. But we know that a lot of people are going over to China alone as well, so we wanted to kind of make this public and share with everybody how you can go over to China effectively, safely, and just understand how to get over there and how to source products. So today we have quite the all-star panel lined up for you to go over this information. We have, of course, myself, Will Mitchell. I am the founder of a company called StartupBros, co-founder of a company called Simply Organic Beauty, a large e-commerce company. I've been going over to China since I was 15 years old, and I've probably spent a good 4 or 5 months of my life over there, so quite familiar with it. But honestly, the other guys on this call are even more professional when it comes to going over to China than I am. So I'm going to hand it over to them, and you guys can introduce yourselves as well. We got Dr. Ben on the call.
Hey, everybody. I started my e-commerce business a couple years ago with my business partner, Peter. Both currently practicing physicians, but we've carved out a lot of time to source products and head over to China. In the past couple of years, I've spent, 25 or 30 days in the past 18 months or so over at the Canton Fair sourcing products. But my business partner, Peter, we can go to him next, Dr. Peter, has spent even more time over there.
Yeah, so as Ben said, we're partners in our e-commerce business. And in the last 18 months, I've gone to the Canton Fair 3 times, visited factories, and just spent quite a bit of time there. So far, about 90 days just in the last year and a half. So quite familiar with the culture and experience of dealing with factories and trade shows in China.
Nice, very cool. And I know, Peter, you've been over there. I know you've spent literally months in China at this point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just recently out there visiting factories, so quite a few trips.
Nice, very cool. Yeah, Peter's all-around pro when it comes to actually getting in these factories, building relationships, so we look forward to hearing about that. We also have Dot Frederick in the house. How you doing, Dot?
I'm good. I'm doing good. I'm excited to be here.
Good stuff. And I know you've been over to China quite a few times now. You actually do all the logistics and everything for these trips to China with 30-plus people, so I'm sure you've seen kind of everything.
Yeah, we get a lot of different types of situations and problems that come up with different countries. So we work a lot. I work a lot with the people that are attending the trip, and then I work pretty closely with Mark and Eve to get questions from China answered that people have for us. So in the past 18 months, I've been to China about 42 days, give or take, doing different factory tours and the Canton Fair, of course. I've been with Peter a lot, so we've gotten to know each other pretty well recently. But yeah, I have some experience traveling, and I hope that helps people when they are learning what it's like to travel to different countries and stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Dot's helped so many people from different countries too, and so many different issues from different countries that you've kind of seen everything and know how to solve all that stuff. So really look forward to seeing your insights here today as well.
Yeah, Dot is a pro at managing large groups of people in very foreign countries, so good person to have on the team.
Yes, absolutely. So that is Dot, and we look forward to having her. And then we have Mark Ramos, who's actually over in China running a sourcing company over there. So how are you doing, Mark?
Doing great. I'm great to be here, guys.
Nice, very cool. And Mark, can you run us through kind of what you do over in China, how you've been involved with the Sourcing Summit, Canton Fair, all that?
Okay, yeah, I've been back and forth to the Canton Fair since 2006, and I've been living in China for about 4 years straight now, and been sourcing for our own company with my beautiful partner Yi, and we have a lot of marketing friends such as yourself, and I've been sourcing for them for quite this time. So that's my experience, I guess, in a nutshell.
Nice, very cool. And yeah, I know Mark, you're with Eve as well, and Eve is is Eve your partner in the e-commerce or the sourcing business? And Eve, hopefully you can give us a rundown of kind of, I know you have a lot of experience, just dealing with business in China in general.
Yes, here she is. She'll say something real quick.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, Eve. Yeah, and awesome stuff. I know Eve is super helpful when it comes to negotiating with hotels and getting group rates on all these different things. So Eve's been hugely helpful for our groups going over there, and just an all-around pro for kind of getting business done in China, I think so.
True. I wouldn't be able to function without Eve.
The trip would not, right? Yeah. Awesome stuff. Well, guys, you have quite the all-star panel here today. You have people who know how to get over to China. You have people who know how to source products in China, and you have people who know how to launch those products and actually have them affect the bottom line of your business, right? And that, in a nutshell, is what we want to do when we're going over to China to source these products. So very excited to hear from all of us here today. I have a slide here that kind of goes over what we're going to talk about here today. And hopefully we can just start running through it and kind of sharing our thoughts on what we think people need to know about before going to China, while in China, all these different areas of traveling and sourcing products in China. So let's just go down the list and start kind of going around roundtable style. The first thing I wanted to talk about was pre-China. Before your trip, what do we need to do? What is absolutely required to get into China? How do we actually get over there? All these different things. Packing. Do we need vaccines? Let's talk about that stuff for a little bit.
All right.
Yeah, sure. So there's really only a couple things that you need to get into China, right, Dot? We're talking passport and a visa.
Yeah, you definitely
That sound
need
right?
Yeah, and maybe like a toothbrush or something because it's a long trip. But yeah, you definitely need a passport. And one of the tricky things about your passport is it needs to be valid for at least 6 months after the trip. That's caught people up a few times. It's just a rule that different governments have, I guess, that you have to have a passport that doesn't expire within 6 months of the trip ending. So I think, did that catch you up one time, Ben? You had to get an expedited passport one time because you didn't have a...
Yeah, the last time we went to China, the last sourcing summit trip we ran, my passport was going to expire in 4 months or so. And so, at least for the U.S., there has to be at least 6 months on your passport before you get into China. And so I had to go through the process of getting an expedited visa. And there's lots of places out there, or expedited passport, and there's lots of places out there to do it. And I'm sure we can throw together a resource page for this video specifically, but it was not very hard. It took, I think they turned it around in like 5 days. It was really quick. I was really impressed. They actually have somebody who physically goes to the passport office. You mail them their information, and they're your representative, and they'll go and get all the information, get your new passport, and mail it back to you. And so, yeah, it was really great. I got it really quick, and I had a Chinese visa in my old passport, and I didn't have to get a new visa. I just carried 2 passports. I carried my old passport with the visa and my new passport.
Yeah, so the visa is still good. You just have to be able to show them both at the border, which is
very nice.
Nice, yeah.
So you basically have 2 things here that you absolutely need to actually get into China. The passport must be at least 6 months before the expiration date, and of course, like Ben and Dot said, you can get that expedited. I've even gotten an overnight passport before, so I know you can get that very quickly in the situation that you do, but you just need to know about that. And then, of course, you have the visa. Let's talk about the visa for a second, too. I know a lot of people are going to be asking, other than that passport having 6 months on it, what else do I need to actually get a visa? What's the process for applying? How much does it cost? Who do I go to? These sorts of things. So maybe we can just go down the list and kind of talk about, for at least those of us who have gotten Chinese visas. I'm not sure if Mark and Eve have, but for all of us who have gotten these visas so many times before, maybe we can just talk about our experience, how we've done it, what sites we've used, things like that.
Yeah.
So let me just lead off here for a second. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dot.
Oh, you're good.
But there are a couple ways that you can go about getting your visa. Of course, it's going to vary a little bit country by country. We can only really speak specifically on the U.S. That's where a majority of our attendees come from, and it's going to be different for each individual country. But you can get it in your home country and go to these websites like My Chinese Visa, I think, is one. And Dot, is there another one that people have been using a lot?
My China Visa and then VisaExpress.net.
Yeah, and a non-expedited service for that it'll cost you probably $200 or $300, and I'm sure they have expedited options too.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
the other way you can do it is going direct to a Chinese embassy. Is that correct, Dorothy?
Yeah, you can go right to a Chinese embassy, and sometimes they have same day service for those. It kind of depends on their workload. But you talk directly to the Chinese embassy, and they give you the paperwork and stuff to fill out. And people like that if they're near one because they don't have to mail their passport in. If you do a service or something like that, you have to mail your passport in through like a certified express service or something like that. So they come back. It's not like they'll get lost or anything, but some people don't like doing that, so they go right.
We haven't seen anyone lose a passport yet, so that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, getting the visa is one of these hurdles that freaks people out a little bit, but it's really one of the easier ones. And even if you don't have your visa the day before you go to China, what did we do, Peter? Give you a second to unmute yourself.
You are able, if you fly into Hong Kong and your country, which the United States allows to enter without a visa, you're able to get an emergent same-day visa. I don't necessarily recommend it because it's a lot more stressful, but we were able to drop off our application around 9 in the morning, picked it up at 6 p.m., and then caught our train into China that night.
Yeah.
I would recommend planning ahead. Makes it a little less stressful.
But
Yeah,
it
it was
is
like $1,000 for each expedited visa, wasn't it?
Yeah, the fee is like $400 same day fee. Then there's a like service fee on top of that, plus the $200 fee for the visa. So it's
Well,
quite
it's not
expensive.
also.
Yeah, if you decide to do that option, go straight into Hong Kong. I've done that before. I've escorted clients on the Sourcing Summit to do that before. Certainly not a headache or anything. One great service for it is Sun Visa. They're a Hong Kong-based visa company that we've used before for that. So that's a great company and relatively cheap. So that is a good option for that. But that really covers the 3 different ways you can get your visa, right? You can either go with any service because there's tons of different visa services out there, right? So you can go with a visa service. You can go do it yourself at the Chinese embassy, or worst case scenario, you can fly straight into Hong Kong, which does not require a visa, and get the visa there same day or next day. Does that pretty much sound like everything to you guys?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
think that's pretty much everything. I don't know if Mark and Eve have seen any problems popping up with all the people that they've helped get in and out of China, particularly regarding passports and visas. So I don't know if you guys want to jump in with anything.
Yeah, they should just follow the advice of their company that they use, and I recommend anybody use a company because trying to do it themselves is pretty difficult if they try to do that.
Yeah,
Yes.
the good thing about the companies is this is what they do all day, every day, so they've pretty much seen every problem possible, so they fix them all. So
Yes, and they have relationships with people at the embassy that they can say, hey, maybe you can just get this one by. So yeah, it's always a good idea.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's talk about a couple other pre-China things. Couple other things. People going over to source products in China, a really common question that they have, at least that I've heard, is do I need business cards? How am I going to represent myself over there, right? Do I need business cards? And what other things do I need to have? Like, do I need, walking shoes? Do I need to bring a pen and paper? How does my phone work? So let's talk about kind of what we're going to be packing and bringing over there, starting with business cards, I guess. Do you guys recommend having business cards?
Yes. Bringing business cards is going to be very important.
A resounding yes
They're
from the whole panel. All right, cool.
Yeah, you can get expedited business cards while you're in China. Peter and I have had to do that a couple of times. It's always just kind of a big headache. Just make sure you bring your business cards. It's so much easier if you remember them. Business cards are really a big thing in China. They're not a big thing in the U.S. or many other Western countries, I don't think, but they really hold a lot of weight for some reason in China. I don't know, Mark and Eve, you can comment as to why that might be, but you're going to need it for going into the Canton Fair, for getting like your buyer's badge and things like that. So things you want to put on your business card. Obviously you can put your full real name. A lot of people want to put fake information on their business card, but that's not really necessary. You just don't necessarily want to put your main contact information, like your phone number, your main email, or your main Skype or anything, because you're going to get a lot of messages. You're going to be giving out hundreds of these things at the Canton Fair, if that's where you're going. So what we typically do is we'll put our full name, our company name, our title, and we'll put sourcing agent, because that's who goes to things like this. Sourcing agents, people looking for products. It's not necessarily going to be the CEO, right? It'll give you a lot more easy negotiating workarounds if you are not the owner of the company, of course. Then we'll put on our Skype contact, an email specifically for sourcing communication. We usually leave off a phone number, but we'll throw on WeChat also. WeChat's pretty big in China and can actually help you communicate with suppliers that aren't otherwise available very easily by email or phone or something like that. What do you guys think? Mark, what do you guys think about business cards and what should be on it and how to handle that?
As far as what is to be put on the business card, I believe everything you said is correct. This is what the Chinese companies are looking for, and it's just a way to reach you. But as you said, I wouldn't recommend putting your primary email or anything, because you will get a lot of emails from these companies.
Yeah, great point there. And would everyone pretty much agree that having WeChat over in China is a great asset at this point? I just feel like having a WeChat will really allow you to build that relationship with the supplier so much more effectively. Do you guys kind of find the same thing?
Yes.
Okay, great. So absolutely, let's put a WeChat on there. The next question that people are going to have is, how many business cards do I need?
Peter, how many did we use the last few times we went? Maybe a couple hundred?
I think a couple hundred, because every booth or anybody you talk to wants a card, and it's just a way to get your introduction and get the catalog. So it's not just someone you're like, I'm going to deal with them for sure, so you're passing them out left and right.
But always
so
with
I'd bring
two
at least
hands.
a couple hundred. Yes.
Always with two hands. Yes.
Yeah, always take them, give them, and receive them with two hands. It's almost sort of a bow, right? It's a little dance. It's not like a true bow or anything, but you treat your business cards with respect in China. Here in the U.S., you just kind of like one hand kind of toss it out there and say, "Here you go, here's my card." In China, it's more of a symbol of respect. Take the card with two hands and say thank you, and look at the card, and things like that. And
inspect it, and like you said, treat it with respect, right? In the U.S., we have a big habit of just stuffing things in our pockets. That is not what you want to do with a business card in China. Am I correct on that?
Yes, that is very correct.
Okay, good to know. So 100 to 250 business cards. We want to have basic contact information, but not our main email. Preferably make sure we have a WeChat ID on the business cards. And then one last comment I'll make about the business cards is, even if you did run out, even if you did forget them, it's pretty easy to get those made in China, especially if you're going to something like the Canton Fair. There's literally booths all over the place that sell business cards. So obviously it's going to be better to get nice cards made at home and bring them with, but keep that in mind. So.
Yeah. Now let's talk for a second about something related to the business cards that you need to get into the Canton Fair and get your buyer's badge. A lot of people stress over the Canton Fair invitation, and
Yes.
I know, Will, that you've worked a lot with this, and Dot's worked a lot with this, and Mark and Eve, I'm sure you've had some experience with this as well. But it's one of those things. The Canton Fair invitation is nice to have, and you need a few things in order to register for it online before your trip, but you can also get around it. So let's have a little discussion about the Canton Fair invitation.
I guess let's first talk about how to get that Canton Fair invitation. Dot, you can start with this. I know I've done a ton of these invitation letters as well, but I know you're dealing with a lot of them too.
Yeah, the invitation letter that comes when you apply on the website?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you create an account on the Canton Fair website, and it kind of walks you through how to register your business with the fair, and how to enter all your information, and then you'll be like approved for an invitation letter, and it should be emailed to you. and it should appear in your account on the Canton Fair website.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
there's sometimes a little bit of a struggle because it'll go to like a spam folder or something like that. But it's not. It's a little bit intuitive, but the website can sometimes be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, I know.
What's the downside of not getting your pre-registration for your Canton Fair invitation, right? It means you're going to have to pay $20 when you get to register for your buyer's badge actually in China. So the Canton Fair invitation, it's a nice to have. It'll save you $20 and it'll make you feel less stressed out. But you can also just pay an extra $20 and give them your business card and fill out the information when you get the buyer's badge.
And get it done there. Yeah.
Now, I think there is one more alternative, and that is getting a tourist visa. Are people able to get a tourist or a business visa for this sort of trip?
Yes.
I believe they are. I believe they are.
Yeah,
So
who wants to answer that? Yes, Dot, you can go ahead and answer that.
we'll have to edit this part out.
You'll be able to get into the fair with the tourist visa too. It's just the getting to China part that the visa matters for. And then once you're there, you can go to the fair.
The tourist visa is good for a shorter period of time. So a business visa for China, for the U.S. is 10 years, and then a tourist one, I don't know. There's different lengths that you can get, but it's like it's a year
and sometimes
or
there's
somewhere.
single entry or
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense then. So if, in the worst case scenario that you go to the Canton Fair website and it is just impossible to get that invitation letter, well, it's okay because there's you can just go to the Canton Fair and get that invitation letter for $20. And in terms of getting over there, because I think you do need that Canton Fair invitation to get a business visa, but again, in the worst case scenario, you can just apply for a tourist visa, go over to Canton Fair, pay the $20, and walk right in. So either way, you just got to get to China and go to the Canton Fair essentially.
Yes.
Now, the one thing I'll mention about the Canton Fair invitation is that website can be convoluted. And by the time you're watching this video, we will have a video released, and I'll make sure there's a link with this video to see how we're basically going to do a video walkthrough and show you how to get that Canton Fair invitation on the website, because it can be confusing. Just look for that video, and it'll walk you right through that. I have one more question about pre-China. Does anyone have any more comments on this?
Well, one thing is everyone's worried about having the letter ahead of time. When Ben and I first went to the Canton Fair, we did the buy the pass on the spot and paid the $20. And then also, I think last trip, Ben lost his badge and redid the purchase of it also.
I didn't lose it. I just left it at home and now have 2 awesome badges. So
Right.
Right. I think a lot of things, it sounds like when you're planning your trip to China, there's a lot of things that sound really official and really confusing. But as we've seen, it can be pretty simple if you've done it before or have access to someone that's seen this stuff before. So.
Yeah.
The one last thing I want to talk about before we go to China, per se, is first of all, a packing list and a vaccine list. Let's first talk about the packing list. What are some must-haves for all of us going over to China? What are the things that we just absolutely must bring?
Shoes that you can walk all day in are pretty important because you'll be doing lots of walking. So if you can walk in high heels all day, good for you. But I can't, so bring some tennis shoes.
Good to know. I think just walking through the Canton Fair is a good 1.5 miles. So.
Yeah, it's massive.
Oh man, it's grueling. It's a grueling walk. Make sure you bring your pedometers or your Fitbits or whatever too. But
lots of points.
one thing that the first time Peter and I went, like I said, it was a very last minute, and we just kind of hopped on a plane and got our visas and went into China. But the very first day we got to the Canton Fair, we saw all these people walking around with roller bags, and we were like, ha, nerds. People with roller bags. And then like halfway through the day we were like, man, we need a roller bag. We have so many catalogs. This is getting heavy to carry around. So yeah, like having a little carry-on size roller bag is actually pretty handy if you're going to be taking a lot of catalogs. We've gotten fairly selective now with the catalogs that we take, but even then it gets you kind of loaded up.
It does.
But in addition, you want to bring notepad and pen. I mean, you can buy that in China too, just to write down the information. But really, if you bring a smartphone and make sure your smartphone will work in China, either by getting an international data plan, which most of the major carriers have some kind of international option where you can say, like, at $10 a day gets you your regular talk text data plan, or something like that, or it has to be able to take a China Mobile SIM card, because you can buy SIM cards immediately when you get off the airplane and get into China. And that's kind of a prepaid SIM card. So you want to do that, make sure your phone will work, and you want to download WeChat. You want to download WeChat before you leave your home country, because it will be a pain.
And right, you can't access Google Maps, you can't access Facebook, so make sure you install this stuff and get your directions and get the address and everything. Make sure you do that before you fly to China, right?
Yes, it's very helpful.
Cool, good to know. And the one thing I'll add to this packing list is a power converter. I think having a power converter can be very useful. Now, of course, if you're going with us on Sourcing Summit, you're going to be staying at the Ritz-Carlton at a huge discount with that group rate. So I think they're going to have power converters for you. But most people are not going to be coming with us, and they're not going to have that group rate. If you are staying in pretty much any other hotel, make sure you bring a power converter as well to make sure you can plug into the walls there.
At the Ritz-Carlton, you don't even really need a power converter. They have it all.
Right. So for those of you coming
Anything
with,
else,
you're already covered.
Yep.
Any other packing tips or things to bring that Peter, Mark, Eve, anybody wants to throw in there before we move on?
Yeah, one thing everyone would want to download is Google Translate. You're able to download it and then download the Chinese database. It'll work offline. So even if you can't get to Google, Google Translate will work, and it'll do audio and picture and text translate.
That's handy.
So it'll be very helpful for you to have.
Nice. That's a good one. That
And
is one
also,
Sorry, go ahead.
about the SIM card, when you come in from Hong Kong, if you want to buy a SIM card from Hong Kong airport, just make sure that it works in the mainland China, because it's not automatic.
Oh, yeah.
Right. We almost bought a SIM card when we were in Hong Kong the first time, that it was a better deal or something, but it only worked in Hong Kong. It has to have a dual capability in Hong Kong and mainland China. It will say physically on the chip, like mainland China works in mainland China.
Useful to know. I didn't know that. And I've always just gotten an international plan and kind of used my regular phone. But that is certainly not the cheapest option. Just getting a SIM card over there will save you several $100. So good to know there.
Definitely cheaper, and that's what we've done the last few times. But we're starting to move over to doing the international plans on our phones as well. But something else you can do is rent those little Wi-Fi hotspots that you can get online, like xcomglobal.com, I think is one of them. There's a couple other ones, but you can rent them, and they work in China, like 3G, sometimes 4G, and it can be handy if you're trying to do like product research on the fly, or if you don't have a data plan or something on your phone.
Useful to know as well. Good stuff.
So
and then yeah, go ahead, Peter.
One more thing to add is if you do the data plan from like Verizon or AT&T, it's not always guaranteed, but I did it on my last trip, and Verizon had a built-in VPN. So I didn't have to use a VPN, but just using my regular data, I could have access to Google, Facebook, and everything, and they just VPN'd me into Dallas. So that was one of the advantages to using Verizon's data plan.
That's very cool. And for anyone who doesn't know what a VPN is, it stands for a virtual private network. Essentially, it will send all of the internet traffic out of your phone or your computer or whatever. It'll send it all to basically an anonymous server first. So if you're Googling something, well, all that China will be able to see is that you're connecting to this place in Dallas, right? Once you connect to that place in Dallas, they're going to send you to Google, but China can't see that. So it's a way to bypass the Great Firewall of China because they block lots of different sites in China. So a VPN is another thing here that's going to be essential, and we'll cover that in the general China section, I guess, because that is something we want to talk about a little bit more. I have one final question, one final pre-China question before we get into the nitty-gritty of actually being in China. Common question I hear all the time, do we need vaccines? And of course we have two doctors on the call right now, so what better panel for this? Any vaccines necessary for China?
So Peter and I, both being doctors, have never gotten any extra vaccines other than the recommended ones here in the United States. Dot, what did the WHO have to say about travel recommendations to China?
Well, I have the CDC information. Is that okay?
That'll work. They're pretty good.
They recommend routine vaccines within your home country. And then for adventurous eaters, they recommend hepatitis A and typhoid, which are pretty standard if you're traveling outside of Western countries.
Yeah. And I think if you're traveling with the group, you're not going to be a super adventurous eater. That's another benefit to going with our group is, you know, we've already, you know, been to China so many times. We know the good restaurants. We know the high quality places. So you won't have to worry about that too much if you're going, you know, with the group. If you're going to China on a budget, though, and you're staying at, you know, a one-star motel or something, then maybe you want to get those vaccines.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark and Eve will keep us in the right path if you're on the sourcing summit. So.
Yeah, for sure. Good to know. Good to know. All right. Well, I think that's all the pre-China questions I have for you guys. And I actually noticed here I missed our first point, unfortunately, so we'll have to backtrack a little bit. So now we know what we need to do before our trip in China. Ben, can we talk a little bit, and I'm sorry, I wanted to do this first, but can we talk a little bit about where to actually source products in China? Because I know people listening to this call that aren't on Sourcing Summit, they're probably wondering, and we can breeze through this, but you know, they're probably wondering, Canton Fair versus going to a factory, you know, what are the different ways that we can source products, and what are some quick pros and cons on those?
Sure, yeah. So there are, of course, hundreds and thousands of places to source products all over the world, but everybody on this call is pretty much settled on China as a great place to start for various reasons that I won't go into now, but there are different ways that you can do this. You can do this from home on sites like Alibaba, Global Sources, AliExpress, things like that. You can hire a sourcing agent if you want to stay at home, which has its own issues. But we're talking about going direct to China, so we're going to talk about how to source those products while you're physically on the ground, boots on the ground in China. So in terms of finding good suppliers, and we won't go into that in too much detail right now because it's a whole big discussion, but there are basically three methods that we use when we go to China to source products. We have used in the past wholesale markets such as One Link in Guangzhou or Yiwu, the popular Yiwu lately, wholesale markets, which they have a lot of smaller factories and suppliers that have a very wide array of products. The issues that you'll run into there, the good things are that they're cheap. You can get them relatively cheap prices and low MOQs, and there's a large selection. The problems that you run into is numerous, but the biggest among them are probably the consistency in your quality of inventory, your availability of the same type of inventory every time, and then there's some questionable legal issues with some of these suppliers being not licensed to export outside of China. So we've had some success with Yiwu markets, but with the way Amazon is, Yiwu and wholesale markets, but with the way Amazon has changed and going more towards having a very strong brand, the things like consistency and quality and consistency and availability and just overall logistical issues has made us move away from these wholesale markets in favor of bigger things like direct factory visits or trade shows like the Canton Fair. So that brings me to the next one, which is direct factory visits. You can use these websites like Alibaba and Global Sources to kind of research factories that you may want to go visit. And Peter can talk a lot about this. What are some of the benefits of visiting factories directly, and like how do we find those factories, and why is that maybe a good way to go along with the Canton Fair?
So at the Canton Fair or on Alibaba, these factories get tons of messages from people who want to buy from them. They want samples. Most of them end up not even following through with an order. But if you actually go to China, so you go to the Canton Fair, you meet them, that shows you're more likely to buy from them. When you actually set up a factory visit, it shows that your company is a legit buyer. They're willing to actually send their sourcing agent to their factory, and you get to meet them one-on-one. So it shows that you're a serious buyer for them. The advantage for you is by visiting the factory, you'll know, is it a trading company or a factory? Because if they can only show you a showroom or some of the products, you can have concern, is it a trading company? Or if they can show you like the actual stuff they're making, all the raw materials, and show you everything they can make, you're able to know it's a real factory. By going there, you can make changes to the product, and you can be like, hey, here's what I'm looking at. I want to make it taller, I want to make it this color, and they're able to make changes right there. The last factory I visited, I told them what I wanted to see this sample. They made it that afternoon. I told them what I wanted. The next morning, they showed me the sample. So you're able to speed up your production time. You're not shipping samples back and forth across the world. You're able to see stuff in real time. And
Yeah, so
the way
definitely, I think that, sorry, I just want to jump in here and say that the reason you would go to source direct from a factory and do a factory tour trip like Peter just got back from is if you have an idea of the product that you want to make already or the product line that you're trying to grow or get into. It's not something that you would do if you were trying to figure out what type of product you wanted to do. This is if you have it narrowed down and you're ready to either make lots of modifications to a specific product that you want to do, and you want to get in there and physically be with the person who's going to be responsible for those modifications, or if you're looking to rapidly expand a product line, so you can go in and see all the products that any one of these factories has to offer, and you can say like yes, no, yes, no, yes, 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 you know, and do it that way. Would you agree with that, Peter?
Yes. Yeah, like Ben's correct. If you're just looking, like I'm looking to source a product, you definitely don't want to be visiting 15 factories. This is once you've worked with, like, decide you're going to use them to make your production.
Yeah, exactly. And then the final way to do this is by going to trade shows, like the biggest one in China, I believe, is the Canton Fair. Of course, that happens twice a year. And this would be, it has a very broad range of products across 3 different phases, and you can find, if you're looking for a brand new product or looking to expand a product line or looking for a very specific product, all the people at the Canton Fair are really high quality suppliers in general. You have a higher likelihood of finding a supplier that will scale with your business at the Canton Fair than you do on Alibaba or at wholesale markets. So that's kind of a general overview of where to source products in China. Mark, Eve, is there anything that you think that we should add there? We kind of glossed over sourcing agents because we're kind of specifically talking about physically yourself going to China and everything, but maybe you have some thoughts that you want to throw in there?
I think you covered the main points about doing that, because Canton Fair is the largest, but the Pajot complex is so huge. You understand that, you know, practically every month there's a new show here in China in that place. So
yeah, so it's going to be, the stuff that we're talking about here is going to be interchangeable in a large part to all the different trade shows, specific types of trade fairs that go on in that complex in Guangzhou. So should be useful all throughout the year.
yes.
Okay, that all sounds very good. That all makes sense. And then I am not sure if you mentioned this explicitly, but it sounds like everybody here kind of leans more towards Canton and major high-quality trade shows rather than, you know, wholesale markets and things like that. Could we quickly talk about the differences between a wholesale market and a trade show like the Canton Fair for people who have never even seen or heard of either?
Sure. I'm gonna just run through this really quickly, and Peter, Mark, Eve, you guys can, and Dot, you guys can jump in and correct me or add something if you think you need to. But like I was saying before, the wholesale markets, you can find a wide range of pretty cheap products with low MOQs. So places like Yiwu or the wholesale markets in Guangzhou, you can just walk in there, start looking at stuff, say, say how much, can I get a case, and you can get a lot of different products for really cheap. So it can be good for a budget. And they'll even do some minor like private labeling, putting your logos on things and some packaging and things like that. So it can be really good for like a shotgun approach, if you're familiar with that term, just kind of blasting a bunch of products out onto Amazon. And we're talking specifically about Amazon here because the e-commerce world is very Amazon-centric right now, and it's the easiest way to launch new products at the moment. So a year ago, it was really easy to do the shotgun approach. Take a handful of spaghetti, cook spaghetti, throw it up on the wall and see what sticks, right? And you just run with the ones that stick and get more of that. Well, the problem with that, with the changes that have happened on Amazon recently, it's clear to me that brands are going to be the way to go to build revenue and generate revenue in a business based off of Amazon so that you can then expand into other channels. But personally, and you guys can jump in here, I think it's going to be really hard to build a consistent brand based on products that you find at wholesale markets because the consistency of quality is not there, the consistency of the actual physical product isn't there. It may not be that it's a quality issue, but they may just sell you what they have at the time, and then they'll change some specifications and they'll sell you whatever they have that is similar to what you ordered last time. So the way your product matches the detail pages on your channels like Amazon and Walmart and your Shopify store is important for customer consistency. You don't see big brands like the iPhone or Nike shipping different versions of the same product that have slightly different sizes that are, they have different sizes, but they're all the same SKU, have to be exactly the same, right? So it's just not a very good way to go about building a very strong brand.
It sounds like there's some quality issues, consistency issues, and to me too, it sounds like it's kind of the end of the food chain, right? To me, it seems like products start their life cycle in this world at the Canton Fair, and eventually, just through years and years of people selling that product, they eventually end up in these wholesale markets. I kind of see it as the end of a product's life cycle, right? And I think a lot of Amazon sellers are looking for new, for novel, for innovation, for things that they can sell and catch eyes with. Whereas I think Yiwu and other wholesale markets are just a lot of coffee mugs and things like this that, yeah, they can sell well, but like you said, I don't know if you're going to be able to build a scalable and sellable business out of these things in the future rather than just kind of scrambling, right, all the time.
Yeah, Peter. How much time did we put in at Yiwu so far in the last year or so?
I know Don and I have done 2 trips to Yiwu, spending about 7-10 days there each trip. We've dumped probably $30,000 to $50,000 into products, and like I said, a couple have hit off, but now we've run into the problem of we can't get the exact same product replicated because the factories aren't as big, and so it's been a big hassle, and I'd say of most of our products we've had to cut them, and now we're trying to find new suppliers just because they can't keep up with our growth and quality requirements.
So it sounds like to an extent you guys are growing fast in spite of the wholesale markets and not because of them, right? Like obviously there's value there, you found some great products, but now you're kind of having to scramble to find a real consistent supplier that you can rely on to build a business out of these products?
Yeah, it can definitely be a good way to make a little quick cash, but it's not something that, in my opinion and Peter's opinion, I think not something to really grow a scalable business on.
Cool. Could not agree more. And I think it sounds like everybody on the call then is in pretty much agreement that factory visits and major trade shows like the Canton Fair are the way to go. And wholesale markets can almost be a fun thing to do on the side while you're there, but probably not good to depend on those to build your business. Does that sound like everyone's in agreement on that?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we will move on to the next section then. And I know a lot of people just have general questions about China. Like, what is it like there? What is the culture like? There's obviously quite a culture shock. If you've never left the United States and you're going to China for the first time, you're going to experience a culture shock. So I know a lot of people are worried about getting sick over there, the crime rates and things like that. So let's dispel some myths and talk about what it's actually like in China. I guess let's just start with what is it like over there? What's the weather like? We go over there in April and October. So maybe we can talk about the spring weather and the fall weather, since that's when most people are sourcing over there.
Yeah, I think this section is going to be really heavy with Mark, Eve, and Peter, I think. So maybe Mark and Eve, you guys can start a little bit with talking about the weather during the Canton Fair and kind of the rest of the year.
Yeah, sure. Guangzhou is more in the south of China, so it's more of a I would relate it to like Florida in America in comparison, because the weather is pretty similar. It's very warm most of the time of the year, and we do have a rain season, but that's only lasts for like about a month and a half or so. But the rest of the year, it's usually pretty humid and and warm.
Well, and in terms of do people? Is it smart to bring a sweater? Obviously, people aren't going to need a winter jacket or anything. So you think just kind of casual, almost California type clothes, or?
Yes, I would recommend everybody at least bring some rain gear, because that's something that has been happening the last year or two, that it's been raining during the April session or the spring session many times. But majority of the time, I would just say to bring what people would feel comfortable with.
Yeah, and when we say rain gear, we don't mean like a full-on fisherman's poncho. More like a light weather-resistant jacket, if that, but maybe a little umbrella or something like that.
Yes.
If you're staying in a nice hotel, they always have umbrellas, so you don't have to bring them. If you're staying in other like smaller hotels, they might not have. So you can buy umbrellas here for pretty cheap, so it's not like really necessary.
Oh yeah. That's true, that's true. And I do like spinning the Ritz umbrellas on my arm. They got those hooked umbrellas.
Perfect. That's awesome. Yeah, so for those of you going to Sourcing Summit, you do not have to worry about umbrellas, but obviously most hotels are not giving those away. Cool. So another question I hear all the time, people just getting ready to go over to China, thinking about going to China, and we all know the horror stories about the Chinese food and the Chinese water. Is it safe to eat this food? And I guess what kind of food should we expect? Is it, is it all pig heads and things like that, or is there normal food over there? Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the food.
I want to dispel the biggest myth of China, and it's not a third world country like people think it is.
Yeah.
When they first arrive, they get shocked, like, wow, this city is a lot more evolved than I expected. I said, what did you think it's going to be when you come here? So as far as food and water concerns, it's not like going to other countries which we're familiar with, where you have to worry about water, because the country understands to not serve people water straight from the tap. It's they always heat the water or use filters. I mean, it's not something anyone has to worry about.
Yeah, and I know there's always this. Sorry, there's always this fear too of the tap water over there. You probably don't want to drink the tap water, but I've always brushed my teeth and showered with the water, and I've never had any issues. Has anyone here actually gotten sick from Chinese food or water?
No.
No, not
No.
Yeah. So I think we can.
I'm not too concerned. I drink most water that they give me. I don't think anybody on our trip has gotten sick or anything. So
yeah,
I think it's generally okay. But
also,
yeah, also any they'll serve like hot tea and hot water a lot at meals and everything, and that stuff has been, heated up and kind of sterilized anyway. So even if you're worried about that, just know that that type of thing is there too.
And at the Ritz, the hotel rooms all have 2 to 3 bottles that they replace every day for you. So you have plenty of bottled water if you do want to use bottled water to brush your teeth, drink at night, and they'll replace it as much as you need.
Yeah, and you
The
can
Ritz
get
is like a mini USA, though, so if you're at the Ritz, you don't need to worry about anything like that.
And also, a lot of people worry about the ice. If you're not like buying stuff from the street vendor, I think the ice mostly are safe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So ice and like salads and stuff, right? That's the thing that people worry about in Mexico. But you're saying like as long as you're in a reputable restaurant, it's not like a street cart or something like that. They will follow generally pretty good guidelines as far as how they wash things or what ice they use. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
right. Good to know. And then in terms of the actual food that we're going to be eating over there, can we talk about, I guess let's just run through really quick and talk about some of the meals that we've had over there. There's a lot of group meals, there's a lot of rice, a lot of fish. I mean, it's really not, apart from the presentation of the food, it's pretty standard food, is it not?
So I think probably Peter is the most used to American stuff, but also that spent the most time in China, as opposed to like Mark and Eve have been there for a while. So maybe Peter can offer a little perspective here.
Yeah, so for all the days that we're at the Ritz-Carlton, you start off with a breakfast buffet that has more food than you can even imagine to eat. And it has your spread of American food. You've got cereals, yogurt, omelets. They'll have the traditional Chinese dim sum, bagels, anything and everything. So breakfast, you can eat whatever you want. And then when we go out for our group meals, they'll have lots of different, like they'll have beef dishes. And there'll be barbecue beef. It'll be different types of sauteed beef. There'll be fish that they grill, lots of pork dishes. Some will be pan-fried, some will be sauteed. And so everything you imagine of Chinese food in the States, it's not like that, but it's also not the extreme that you will imagine or see portrayed on TV or movies.
Yeah, it's not like deep fried. It's pan fried.
And of course, to what Mark said earlier, once you go over to China, you realize how similar China and the United States really are. You can easily walk outside your hotel and within 5 minutes be at a McDonald's, a KFC, a Pizza Hut. So even if you get homesick, there's lots of options like that too.
Yeah, and for the people not on our trip, you can get as adventurous as you want, right? Like, you can go to the hole in the wall that looks like they've been there for 100 years and try something new, but you can also just go on Yelp and see what people are reviewing, and if it gets like a 5 stars on Yelp, that probably means that a lot of people who are not Chinese have been there, and they've had no problem with it. So we've used Yelp a couple times to look at restaurants when we were like, yeah, what do you want to get? Let's look at Yelp. And I know a couple people on our trip have done that as well and had success. So it's not that hard to find food in China. You might, like you was saying, want to avoid the carts and stuff. There's not that many carts really, but like hot dog stands in the U.S., right? Similar
I've eaten
things
at those too. I mean, I think those are a riskier place, but certainly not dangerous. Certainly not dangerous. And
So,
TripAdvisor, another great source.
So one thing everyone, I hear a lot of people worry about is, I'm a vegetarian. Will I be able to eat in China? There are plenty of vegetarian options. They do lots of vegetables, broccoli, different mushroom dishes, bok choy. So even if you're a vegetarian, that's not going to be a problem, especially if you're on our trip. All the restaurants we choose have a wide variety of vegetables. So just because you're a vegetarian or don't want to eat meat, you're going to be able to have plenty of food, and that's not a problem.
Yeah, that's a great point. I am surprised we didn't think of that. And Dot, in terms of dietary restrictions, is there anything that's too crazy? If I'm vegan, if I'm gluten free, is that going to be trouble for me outside of a group trip like ours?
Outside of a group trip?
Yeah, I know if they're working with you, you can pull some strings. But in general, you know, if I'm gluten free and going to China, how difficult is that going to be for me?
Gluten-free is a little tough. It's that one's a little tough in China. So I do ketogenic diet a little bit when I'm not traveling, and that would be a little harder to do in China. But what I would say is, you know, if you're with us, we can talk to the people and figure out, you know, exactly what's in everything. But you can buy these translation cards for dietary allergies or, you know, sensitivities, things like that, and they'll have translations in Chinese and everything. So, yeah. And I see Mark and his mic is going off and on, so maybe they have something to add to this.
If you're staying in a 5-star international hotels, they always have a gluten-free option, like gluten, like those breads and stuff. But it's not easy to get it elsewhere.
Okay, really good to know.
We have kosher options as well for those people who have those kind of restrictions. Kosher.
Yeah.
And
So if you do have really strict... Sorry, go ahead, Eve.
Oh, the meat they use in the Ritz-Carlton is all halal. If you eat in the streets, then there are other restaurants that halal food or kosher food as well. So you might be looking for those. And because Chinese food, they use the peanut oil a lot. So if you're allergic to peanut, you might have to, like Ben said, you carry a card to ask the waiter waitress how they cook it.
Yeah, for vegan.
Yeah.
And
and if you're allergic to peanuts.
Oh, peanuts. Okay, yeah, that's a good thing to know there too.
Yeah, so guys, if you have like really strict dietary rules that you follow and you can't deviate from that, there's usually ways around it, but definitely I would bring some of your own snacks or foods or pick some up at the stores in China if you can, you know, figure out what's going to follow those rules there, and just have it on hand, just in case you end up at some place that is not going to have an option for you.
Yeah, and I think this is another good place to check. It would be TripAdvisor and Yelp. You know, check for gluten-free restaurants and things like that. If you're going alone, if you're going with our group, obviously we will take care of you. This kind of segues into another really common question that we get, and it kind of goes back into what Mark was saying. There's these interesting myths and connotations about China. So is China safe? Is it violent? Are there lots of scammers? You know, do we have to watch out for pickpocketers? How safe is this area in China?
I would just say use common sense. Don't walk around with money hanging out from your pocket and wearing gold jewelry around your neck, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I've never felt it.
I would say too, do not give money to beggars. I with people on our trip before, I've seen people give money to you know, a child or something at 2 a.m. after walking out of a bar or something, and there's all of a sudden there's just kids everywhere. They're just jumping out of trees, sewers. They're all over the place. So you know, there's going to be a lot of people trying to tug on your heartstrings, I think. If you're in a group with you know, like ours that have been there a lot, we can kind of help watch out for those things. But yeah.
So for generalized safety, for generalized safety, it's very safe in like Guangzhou, Beijing, and especially like if you take a taxi out of the Ritz-Carlton, they're taxis that they know, and when they arrive to pick you up, they'll write down the number of the taxi and tell you what number you were picked up in. And if you leave your phone or laptop in a car, they can look up what taxi picked you up and get in touch with them and try and find if you left your cell phone or laptop in the car.
Peter, it sounds like you're speaking from experience there.
Yeah, so I might have left my laptop and bag in a taxi, and they're all green, got to the Canton Fair, and the taxi disappeared. In a great panic, I called the Ritz. They're able, because there's tons of cameras in China, see which taxi picked me up, where it had dropped us off, and where it ended up next. Sadly, though, they weren't able to find the actual laptop, but they're able to get in touch with the taxi cab driver who looked for it. So yes, like Mark says, common sense. I left my laptop in a taxi. Someone else took it. But had it been a major crime, there would have been cameras so they were actually able to see the person. And since there's such high security in cameras, no one does any violent real crime.
Yeah, and the Chinese government is very, very strict about violent crime towards foreigners. It is something that they just do not put up with in their own base. I think, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark and Eve, but I don't think violence is not going to be an issue. Petty theft, pickpocketers, little taxi scams, these things are all over the place, and that's why it's really useful, again, to go with a group or at least someone who's been there before, because we've kind of seen it all. But in terms of violence, there's, I mean, it's almost 100. It's going to be very, very safe. Don't go walking around some alley, drunk in the middle of the night. But there's a very low amount of violent crime over there.
I would say the most likely scam you would have is with the taxis.
Yeah.
When Ben and I landed for the first time, we went from the train station to our hotel, and they wanted to just quote us a cash price. And we agreed to it and paid about $30 for the taxi ride, which should have been about $6. So the scam is they want to get you just prepay. So long as you know, whenever you get in a taxi, you want it to be an authorized taxi, make sure they're using the meter, you won't get that scam.
Yeah, Mark and Eve, can you talk a little bit about the taxis and the potential? There's a $20 bill thing and the meter. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the taxis?
Right. Avoid paying the taxi driver with a 100 RMB note, because they have this trick that happened before. They look at your 100 RMB note, and they change it to a fake one, and they return to you ask for another one until you're out of 100 notes. So you might want to have small changes all the time to pay them rather than 100. You can easily do that in your hotel or in a convenience store.
Cool.
Good to know
there. All right,
so
cool.
Generally, just to cap it all off here for a second, it's sort of like being in a big city, Chicago, New York, whatever. You make sure you just keep your eyes, looking around and don't do anything crazy. Honestly, I feel safer in Guangzhou than I do in New York or something like that.
I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that 100%. I think I feel much safer in Guangzhou than LA, for instance. And on our trips, we go out, we have fun on our trips. We've been out drinking and things like that, and been to seedy areas and been a little inebriated, and still feel completely safe over there. Yeah, there's more pickpocketing than there would be in LA, but it's certainly a very, very safe place, and I feel like people really do respect Westerners over there. It's not like it's not like you're going to be disrespected or anything like that. It's not like people are going to be targeting you that much. So I think it's very safe over there. Would anyone disagree with that, or should we move on to the next thing?
No, I think that's.
Let's move on.
Cool. So let's back up and get to a lighter subject here. Tell me about the toilets in China. Do I need to bring my own toilet paper? What are these toilets like? I know a lot of people are scared that they're going to be, holes in the ground and sort of thing. Like Mark said, a lot of people have a strange connotation about China. So what is the bathroom situation like over there?
Well, everybody in listening to this video is pretty entrepreneurial, and they're probably familiar with the squatty potty, right? And their whole thing about how the rest of the world poops different, right? So yeah, there are a lot of toilets in China where it's a hole in the ground and you squat and do your business, and that's that. But when we are at these nice restaurants and nice hotels and everything, they usually have Western style plumbing, and this whole thing about bring your own toilet paper. I see this everywhere. I don't know, Mark, Eve, Peter, Dot. Do you bring your own toilet paper? You guys have traveled outside of Guangzhou more than I have.
I do, yeah. I bring a little packet with me because you never know. But that's probably more valid for girls than for guys. So.
Yeah, that's true. I even bring wet wipes. I don't bring toilet paper, but I do bring wet wipes usually.
In China, you need to bring just those little packets of paper because they don't freely give tissues in restaurants or any place anywhere. That's just because they don't do it like how we do in the States.
Is it like that in Guangzhou as well, Mark, or is that is it like that at the Canton Fair as well, or just other areas in China?
No, that's in most of the major places. They don't just freely, because if they just gave tissue paper to everybody, you know how fast that would be.
Yeah, definitely.
So they have to control things. So they in some places they do give you at least one, but then it's not like where you can go to McDonald's in the States and just grab a whole stack load for your whole family.
So when you're staying at the Ritz-Carlton, you've got your standard U.S. toilet paper, amazing showers, and all your normal comforts. All their bathrooms in the public areas are seated toilets. And then a lot of the restaurants we'll go to, either they'll include the tissues to use for napkins, or it's included when we purchase the meal. So when you're traveling with us, if you brought one pack just in case you had to stop somewhere on the way, you'd be fine. But most places we're going to be at, you'll have toilet paper, napkins, because we've pre-checked out most of the places.
It's not such a big concern, and they're always going to be available. So it's not like. And when you say something in the floor, don't imagine just a hole in the ground. It's actually like a porcelain toilet on the floor as well. So it's not like it's not just a hole in the ground. It's actually fully functional.
Right,
with
so Peter, you can comment on this a little bit more since you've traveled out in the surrounding areas in China around Guangzhou a lot more. Really, the only squat-style toilet that I've come across in the last 3 trips to the Canton Fair was the train from Hong Kong to Guangzhou, and that was maybe one other one at like a restaurant that our suppliers took us to, but it's really not that prevalent where we go. And in Guangzhou in general, it's less prevalent, I would say. What do you think?
I'd say in Guangzhou, in your major cities, you're fine. It's when you start getting 3 to 5 hours outside of the city. So at the Canton Fair, where we're going, you're going to be fine. I might say pick up when you're in China 1 packet of tissues if you have to blow your nose or anything like that. But you don't need to pack a 24-pack of tissues. You'll be more than taken care of.
Yeah, it's important
and
to
worst
highlight
comes to worst.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, worst comes to worst, you just take one of the little tissue from the Ritz-Carlton, and you're fine.
Yeah, and what I was going to say, I think it's important to highlight, too, keep in mind that you're going to a major city, right? You're going to have convenience stores. There's 24/7 convenience stores. There's just a lot of kind of stores you can go to buy this stuff as well. So it's not like if you go over to China without tissue paper, you're just done. Fly back. It's over. You can easily go to a store and just grab that. But important to. It's obviously better to bring that on the way over, though. So.
And right along with Will's comment.
Potty talk.
Sorry, what was that, Peter?
Well, I was just going to say is, because everyone has a fear, what if you forget something? What if you don't have something? On one of my flights, like I said, I've been there, this will be my 8th trip to China. My bag was delayed and didn't arrive for 4 days. I stayed at the Ritz-Carlton, just 2 blocks away. I was able to go to a store, and I got full sets of clothes, T-shirts, shorts, pants, socks, everything I could need at an extremely reasonable price and very high quality. So even if you lost your bag, you'd still be able to get everything you need and have a fully functioning trip.
Yeah, that's good to know. And one thing I want to highlight, too, just so we don't sound too pompous on this call with all this Ritz-Carlton reference, the reason why we stay at the Ritz-Carlton out there is, one, because, Eve's got the hook up there. We have an incredible group rate, and we've been staying there for a long time, so we get a great deal there. But also, there's not many hotels that give you these Western amenities, right? There's not many hotels that are going to be fully comfortable and ordinary to someone coming from the United States. So Ritz-Carlton just has all sorts of benefits. It has a VPN built in. You're going to get power adapters. And that's a good thing to talk about as well. With power adapters, what's the voltage over there, and what kind of adapter do we get? And then maybe we can talk about VPNs right after that.
Cool. Yeah, I think the voltage is 220, right, Eve?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and the plug shape is the same as the United States. It's not three-prong though, so you might need to bring an adapter for like your laptop or something like that.
Yeah, and when you're looking at like your laptop and your phone charging cables, if they have a block, like a plastic cube or something, look on that cube somewhere. It'll tell you the voltage range that it can use, and so it's going to range from like 100 to 220, and that means you can use it as long as it plugs in. It'll convert that voltage to whatever it needs for the laptop, so you don't have to worry too much about having a converter that will convert to different voltages depending on what country you're coming from.
Right, and what I do is I just have a universal power converter. So obviously that's going to work for you. And these things are super cheap. I mean, you can get these on Amazon for less than probably $5-10, right? So some type of universal power adapter is going to be fine for you. Like Ben said, you can also, directly go to the actual power supply of your laptop or whatever. A lot of times you can switch out that.
Yeah, and for people coming to the Sourcing Summit, the hotels that we stay in, the Ritz, they don't give you a power adapter because you just don't need it. All the plugs have adapters built in, so you can just plug directly in. So you don't need to worry about that. But I'm not sure which hotels do that other than the Ritz. So if you're not staying with us, then you should at least bring something, and for outside of the hotels too.
Good to know. And then VPNs. So we talked a little bit about the Great Firewall of China, the fact that they, once you're in China, you're not going to be able to access Facebook, you're not going to be able to access Google Maps, your Gmail, unless you have this VPN. So can you guys, I guess, talk about what a VPN is? I know I talked about it a little bit already, but just to refresh people.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take the lead on this for a second, but we do want to make sure that this is relevant for a long time to come, and the people who know here can maybe chime in, but in 2018, the Chinese government plans to make VPNs either illegal or restricted or something like that, where they're not technically going to allow people to use VPNs in China because they can bypass things like Google, Twitter, Facebook, things like that. So we want to make sure that when 2018 rolls around, everybody does the research to know exactly what kind of restrictions there are on that. That being said, currently people do use VPNs a lot when traveling in China, and the VPNs that I've used and recommend are a couple. So ExpressVPN is pretty good, and IPVanish. And what these will do will make it look like you are in a different country. You can make it look like you're in Dallas or you're in Chicago or you're in New York, to whatever firewall there is, between Google and China. So you can access your Gmail, you can access Google Maps, you can access all these things. And these ExpressVPN and IPVanish have programs that work on your phone and programs that work on your laptop. Now, that being said, the higher-end hotels like the Westin, that is attached to the Canton Fair, and the Ritz-Carlton, generally will have VPNs kind of built into their internet. It'll bypass a lot of the firewall, but it's a little inconsistent. The last time we were there, it was the 120th anniversary of the Canton Fair, and there were a lot of government officials in town, and so we noticed a new page on the internet access that said some websites may not be accessible during this time, blah, blah, blah. So it can be a little hit or miss, but generally speaking, the very high-end hotels, Westin, Ritz-Carlton, will have the built-in VPN, so you can access things just like you were in your home country. Now, if you're not using a VPN, or if your hotel doesn't have a VPN, or it's 2018 and you are scared to use a VPN, one thing that you can do is set up a Yahoo account and have all of your Gmail emails forwarded to your Yahoo account that you can access and respond to emails using Yahoo while you're in China. You can also use, I think it's Baidu, B-A-I-D-U, for maps. I'm not sure exactly
Yeah,
we
that's
don't
right.
use that too much because we don't generally need maps, but that's kind of the rundown of VPNs. Does anybody else want to throw in any more information there?
Yeah, I'll mention, be careful with high-end VPNs. I know from experience that most high-end VPNs that you would use in the U.S. Will not work in China. So, for instance, private internet access, which is one of the more high-end ones, that won't work in China. You should look for a China-specific VPN. Most VPNs that are made for, purposes for people in the U.S. Won't work in China. So look for a China-specific VPN. Would be my piece of advice.
Yeah, anybody else want to throw something in there?
No, I think you got.
Looks good.
I think we covered it all.
Cool.
Good stuff, good stuff. And I will say, too, 2018 rolls around, they'll make VPNs illegal. I think they're already illegal, and some are restricted in some way, shape, or form. But keep in mind, there's always going to be a loophole, So I don't know what the loophole is going to be in 2018, but get in touch with one of the people on this call, send us a Facebook message, and, even if it's 2018, I'm sure we will know the loophole at that point. All right, and I have some experience with this next question, so I can definitely cover this, but I'm sure our doctors can as well. What is the medical care like in China if something does happen?
Well, the only medical care I have experience with dealing with in China is our very first trip when we landed in Hong Kong. We were walking off the exit ramp, and before we stepped foot in Hong Kong, some lady fell backwards into my arms and had some kind of seizure or just passed out or something. And like a good radiologist, I laid her down on the ground and immediately called the emergency physician to come over and take care of everything. So Peter did a great job, and everybody there, they had really great equipment on board the airplane, surprisingly. And she was fine. They took her to the hospital. But apart from that, I don't think we've had anybody have a serious medical problem while in China. So maybe Mark and Eve could take this a little bit. But before they start, I will say one of the side benefits of coming on our trip is that you have at least an emergency medicine physician, and if not, somebody who can consult as a radiologist.
That's awesome. The medical care here in China is great. It's just a matter of being able to communicate with them. That's the issue. So this is where it's important to be with a group like ours, or at least be in a hotel where the staff is trained to deal with the medical emergencies. Otherwise, you'll have to rely on trying to relay the information to people that don't understand, and that's going to be an issue.
Yes. I will mention I've had two circumstances on China trips that I've headed up. Perhaps we did too much drinking on ours because we had two emergency medical issues. One was a lady who forgot all of her medicine at home. So certainly something you want to triple check is, do you have the proper medication before you fly over there? And honestly, like, check it a few times on the way over, right? We got the medicine that she needed, and it was very high-end, kind of tough-to-get medicine, very controlled here in the U.S. So we assumed we wouldn't be able to get it. Surprisingly enough, we were able to get it with the help of the hotel and lots of translations. So you can get even prescription, very controlled substances over there through I think we had to go to the hospital for it. The pharmacies over there are very herbal. They are not very similar to our pharmacies here in the U.S. So yeah, I mean, make sure, like Mark said, go with a group and have someone who understands how to communicate with medical staff over there. Because if you don't, you're gonna be thrown into a pharmacy and you're gonna be chewing on a tree root rather than getting the medicine you forgot at home. So just good stuff there. And yeah, for both situations though, the medical care was perfectly fine. It's obviously not as stellar. It's not as high tech as the U.S. But certainly short of needing a open heart surgery or something, it's pretty much going to be the same care over there. So good stuff. If anyone has anything to
Oh, in case of a severe emergency condition, you can always contact your country's consulate or embassy in China. They will always have staff to help.
That's a great point right there. Yeah, didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and Dot just texted me about a little sensitive topic that maybe we should discuss. So if you use tampons during your menstrual period, it's not particularly available in China, according to Dot. So you might want to bring that along, unless Mark and Eve have some kind of backdoor tampon source that they have.
Factory.
I had to order some from a different city one time, so I had to overnight it.
Really? That's crazy. I did not know that one, so that's certainly valuable to bring up. So good to know. Dot, what would your advice be there?
What would my advice be? Be a prepared adult.
Yes.
So along
yeah,
the lines,
I ordered them from a different city, so I had a friend get them when we were there, and she just got on her phone and ordered them, and they were overnighted for an extra fee. So
That's
it was
perfect.
a challenge, though. We went to several different pharmacies, and I got laughed at a couple times, but it was a fun adventure.
Peter, you
So
have something there?
yeah, so what Eve was talking about, if you have like a catastrophic injury, you can talk to your consulate. Something to consider is you can buy traveler's insurance ahead of time, and then for like $200 they'll cover a month or a 2-week trip, and it'll have up to like $50,000 medical, $75,000 like extraction if you need to be flown to the United States for a major injury. They'll cover your transportation and medical treatment. So that's something you can consider. And there's different policies for travel's insurance that'll cover if you need to be flown back from the States because you're having a heart attack or you broke your femur. So it's something to look into before you travel.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good
it's
to
relatively
know.
inexpensive too. It can be something like $100 for that kind of coverage.
Okay, great to know. And we will add some resources on that with this video. All right, cool. Well, I think we have covered medical care then. Let us move on to something else. Let's talk about when I'm over in China, how difficult is it going to be, along these kind of same lines, how difficult is it going to be for me to actually communicate with other Chinese people? Do a lot of people over there speak English, or am I going to need a translator? What's that kind of story?
Nope. they
Yeah,
don't.
so this comes up a lot. Sorry, I'm going to let Mark and Eve take this in just a second, but this comes up a lot. Do I need a translator going to the Canton Fair or this and that? And I would say there's a specific issue that we'll talk about with later in terms of the translators for the Canton Fair, but in general, Peter, you and I, Dot, we've never had a real translator going through China. There have been instances where we've been trying to do something somewhat complicated where we have pestered Eve a little bit. But in general, you can usually get around. Now, there are areas like the taxi cab drivers a lot of times won't speak enough English to really kind of get what you're trying to say. So it can be handy to have have these little cards that we give our attendees or pictures on their phones that says like take me to the Canton Fair or take me to the Ritz-Carlton in Guangzhou, things like that. But Mark, Eve, maybe you can talk about where can we usually find people in Guangzhou that will speak some English, and where is it like not even gonna happen?
If you're staying in an international hotel, they always speak English. Not like super good, but you can communicate with them or ask them to translate if necessary on the phone. In the fair, I would say everybody speaks English. So I don't think you need a translator. If you need you do feel like you're going to the market or other like sightseeing places, you do need a translator. You can always find them outside of the Canton Fair. They always most of them are students, and they're looking for like a part-time kind of thing. So you can hire them for a pretty good price for working 8 hour, 4 hour as you wish.
Give them
Good to know.
average price.
Oh, the average price probably I would say from 200 RMB to 400, so like $30 to 260
Yeah, for an 8
Okay.
hour.
for 8 hours. And oh, there are a lot of them outside the fair, so you don't have to look for one right now before you go.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're
great.
going to talk for a minute about why I don't even think it's a good idea to take a translator into the Canton Fair, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Peter,
Yeah, I mean,
on your
I
trips,
might bring this up too early then, but I absolutely think too. If you're going to a wholesale market like Yiwu, that's a situation where you're going to need a translator. But make sure you get a translator you trust, because I see a lot more translators over there that are cutting deals between the person that they're supposed to be negotiating with. So just make sure it's someone you trust, I think, if you're doing a marketplace like Yiwu. Whereas, Canton, going to a factory, you're probably not going to have to worry about translators that much.
yeah, I guess we can talk about this a little bit now since we're on the topic. So translators in the Canton Fair, right? There's lots of translators available, and we have people every time ask us about translators. So they're worried about not being able to communicate with the people at the Canton Fair. But you got to understand, these factories, they invest a lot in going to the Canton Fair, and they're going to send people who they know can communicate with the largest amount of buyers. And buyers, far and away, communicate in English. And you got people going to college for business English, and that's where these people work. They work at these factories, communicating with you over Alibaba Chat, over Skype, over email. They go to trade shows. They're there. They are there to communicate with you. And furthermore, if you bring in a translator, you are no longer the one that is building that direct relationship with the supplier. They want to know, you want them to know you. You want them to have conversations with you and remember you when you contact them after you get back to your home country. So it's not only not recommended, or it's not only not something you should do, but it's not recommended, I don't think, to get a translator for the Canton Fair. Now, like Will was saying, it's pretty necessary for places like Yiwu and other wholesale markets, and Peter and Dot, you can chime in here, but the people at those factories and those small suppliers, they don't generally hire those people who went to college for business English. So you're going to need a translator, and that opens you up to problems like under-the-table deals, not building a relationship with your supplier, miscommunications because you don't have that direct communication that they could screw up something with your customizations. So while yes, you do need a translator for wholesale markets like Yiwu, you run into those problems, which is another reason why we've kind of steered away from them. Peter, Dot, do you have anything to add regarding translators for the Canton Fair or for Yiwu?
Peter? Do you want to go first? No? Okay, cool. I've had good experiences and bad experiences with translators. It's kind of hit or miss. So if the more you can directly communicate to your supplier, the better, just because you trust yourself, I guess, more than you might trust somebody that you just met. Yeah. So my 2 cents on that.
One big thing which Ben kind of touched on is you want to establish yourself as the communication point. If you have to use a translator at the Canton Fair, how are you going to communicate them when you're back home in the States? So with all the factories I've met and want to do business with the Canton Fair, they have a sales rep who speaks English. We establish a good rapport, exchange WeChat, and the owner might not speak English, but the sales rep will translate with them. Then when we get back to the States, I need to talk to them. We just get on WeChat and communicate in English. So if they don't know any English, you're going to have a hard time communicating down the road when you're going to need to talk to them month after month. So I'd say it's really important to be able to communicate without a translator. And if you do have a translator, you need to be careful that they're not pushing you to deal with certain booths or certain factories, because they can get a kickback up to 5 or 10% commission.
Good to know. And that's only going to apply at wholesale markets, right? That's not really something we need to look out for at Canton?
No, that's more like the wholesale markets. Like there's some in Yiwu that everyone likes to go to, and just around Shanghai and multiple parts of of Chinese country, the wholesale markets.
Okay. All right, great to know. All right, well, all right, cool. That is good to know. Well, I have a few more questions here. Let me just rapid fire this one off to you. How do Chinese people actually react and feel about Westerners and foreigners in general?
We're getting a little bit on thin ice here, right? Like this just gets into stereotypes a little bit, and a little bit of maybe some racial tension stuff. But these are kind of the questions that people are asking who are trying to go to China from foreign countries. So maybe we can assuage their fears a little bit.
I would say Chinese people were pretty friendly with foreigners. Plus, Guangzhou is like a business city, so people are used to having those aspects in the city. So, I'm Chinese, so I'm trying to say like Chinese people are really friendly to foreigners, and they don't think it's a big deal to have people from other countries around, and they treat them like normal, or they always help if you need. So I don't think you should worry too much about it.
Now, Eve, we've had this concern raised several times now, in terms of people being concerned about how Chinese people will perceive them for being overweight or larger than a normal person. What would you say to that?
Because I know it's like a culture thing, because they don't think it's a bad thing, we would recommend Chinese people go to America or elsewhere to not ask women's age, but in China it's totally not a thing. They would ask. So don't feel like offended or anything. This kind of thing is not in the culture, I would say.
Okay. All right, cool. Mark,
I think it's worth mentioning too, don't be worried about it. Like myself, I'm 6'4". My girlfriend has blonde hair. We're essentially treated as celebrities over there. We have people running up to us for pictures and autographs. So, I mean, they're certainly not discriminatory towards Westerners. I think if anything, they're very interested by the novelty of Westerners. And of course, Guangzhou being a business city, you're gonna, they see this all the time, so it's just another day for them. I think as a Westerner, you're gonna have more of a shock going over there than they're gonna have seeing you.
Yeah, true. All right, Dot, you want to add anything?
No, I think you've pretty much covered it. In Guangzhou, since there's so many business people there, it's kind of a diverse area, so everybody's pretty much used to everybody.
Yes.
All right,
absolutely.
Peter, your turn, and I muted you there for a second, but let's start off with how people feel about beards.
So, if you have a beard and go to China, you will be in more and more selfies and people running to you for photos than you've ever imagined. Just in my hour or two I was at the Forbidden City, I probably took 15 to 30 selfies with people.
You're charging for them, right?
I should have. Could have paid for my trip. So people are super friendly, and I did not feel discriminated against at all. But you will stand out, because I am also about 6 foot, bearded guy. Stand out, but it's a problem.
Cool. Good to know. And I think that covers that question. Of course, if anyone else wants to jump in, go ahead. The last question I have for us, I have one final question in this section that I want to ask you guys, but before that, here's this one. For people going over there, obviously we're all going over there to source products and to grow our businesses, but a lot of people like to experience Chinese culture as well. Sorry guys, I'm going to ask that again because my cat's freaking out. So for people that want to go over there, obviously we're all going over there to grow our businesses, to find products, launch products. For those of us that also want to experience a bit of Chinese culture over there, maybe see the Great Wall or see some pandas or something, How do we do that? How much is it going to cost us? Is it going to be disruptive to our trip? And, you know, do I need to hire a guide for that? Can you kind of take us through that? If I want to do an expedition, let's say, how would I do that, Dot?
Well, we have the trip pretty packed with valuable content, so you're probably not going to want to, this is for the sourcing summit, so you're probably not going to want to take one of your days on the sourcing summit out, but we can easily add days to the beginning or the end of your trip for you to go on different excursions and stuff. It's going to depend on what you want to do and where you want to stay. The Great Wall is not really near Guangzhou. It's more near Beijing, so you would have to arrange other travel options for that. But yeah, it's just going to kind of depend on where you want to go. We can direct you.
Yeah, let's talk
obviously
for a second. We'll get to the pandas and the Great Wall in just a second, because I know pandas. Peter's a little panda crazy, so he knows all about the pandas. But let's talk for a second about the things to do in Guangzhou. Now, Guangzhou is pretty much an industrial city. It's there for business and commerce and stuff. But there are a few things to do, and I know Mark and Eve know all about this, so maybe they could touch on a few things that people generally want to try out while they're there.
Why don't we talk about some of our favorite things to do, you know, outside of business in Guangzhou?
Dim sum.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, I was going to talk about the Canton Tower, which is the big. I don't even know how tall it is, but it's pretty prominent in the skyline, and it gets lit up in bright colors during the night. And it's got a restaurant at the top that rotates that we went to one time. Your ears kind of pop as you go up the elevator and everything. So it's definitely something you should try out. And it's just 2 stops away on the underground, on the subway from where we stay at the Ritz-Carlton. And speaking of the surrounding area of Ritz-Carlton, the Opera House is also there. There's the World Mall? It's like an underground mall or something. I think that's what they call it. Mark, Eve, take it away.
Well, you mentioned the Canton Tower. It used to be the tallest TV tower in the world until they made one in Dubai, which always has to compete. But it is a very tall building. We also have the tour, the Pearl River Tour, river tour, night cruises, and those are pretty fun for a lot of people. You mentioned the Opera House, and there's a lot of cultural things to see, but it is primarily an industrial city, so if you're looking for things of historical significance, going to Beijing or Shanghai and those other cities they have more options. But there are nice things to see in Guangzhou, of course, but as most of this is based around business, that's what Guangzhou is known for. It is the center of e-commerce and commerce in China because of the Pearl River Delta, so that's the historical fact that people can look up. And that's why a majority of wholesale markets and manufacturers are located in this area. And why the Canton Fair is held here, because of that. Yeah,
easy kind of access in and out. All right, so those are the kind of the tourist attractions in Guangzhou. But Peter, what about the surrounding areas? I know you saw the Great Wall and you had to see some pandas, so tell us a little bit about that.
So if you're able to have a few days at the end, you can either take a plane ride, train to Beijing, and runs you between $50 to $200 to get up there. The Great Wall is just an hour or 2 taxi ride out of the city. You can see the great historical landmarks around the area, and it's very cheap to get to the wall. So it's one of the main things if you go to China, everyone's going to ask you about. So I would recommend, if you're able to do it, to see that.
It is very
The other thing China is well known for is the pandas. They're also not located around Guangzhou, but you're able to either, again, take the train or fly up to see their location. And you can see the sanctuary where they have the most amount of pandas in the world. You are able to hold a panda, and you can even volunteer, like help take care of the panda sanctuary for a day. So depending on what you're into.
What city is that in?
I don't know.
Wait, didn't you go see it?
No.
See what?
Oh.
I did not go see it. I didn't see the pandas.
I saw the panda when I was like 15.
So we'll have to do some editing there.
That's fine. Well, anyways,
right.
Other good things to do in Guangzhou. Great bars and clubs around Guangzhou. It's a business city. There's some very, very, very high-end lounges and bars and things like that. That's always been a good time. But that's pretty much it. Great malls in China in general. Any mall you go to is going to be a good time. Just fun to see that culture shock. And yeah, if you're getting outside of Guangzhou, Beijing's got tons, obviously, the Forbidden City, the Great Wall. Xi'an has the terracotta soldiers, of course. But hop on TripAdvisor. Hop on TripAdvisor, and if you're coming over to China, look at taking an extra flight and stopping by Beijing or Shanghai or Xi'an and spending a couple days. So, good stuff. Well, to transition off of this subject, I wanted to finish off with what we've all been over there many times now. What are the top things that we've seen kind of other tourists doing or people on our groups doing that they should not be doing? What are some of the kind of pitfalls that people fall into?
Yeah, I think maybe Mark and Eve might have something to say here. What are the top faux pas that you see newbies coming to China doing?
Well, the main one that I think that we should cover is about tipping. China is not a tipping country, but if you are in a Western establishment, such as the Ritz, for example, you need to tip over there. So just keep that in mind. And if you do tip properly, because we do have some people ask us this question, and next you know they leave like something like $1, and that pretty much insults the person that you're tipping. So if you're going to tip generously.
Good to know.
Tip generously or not at all, right?
Yeah, exactly. $1 is more of like a slap in the face rather than not doing anything.
Good to know. Is there anything else? I'm trying to think right now what things we've seen people do faux pas that we haven't already covered. I think we've covered a lot of them, but can anyone else think of any faux pas we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, one thing, just in any country that doesn't speak the language that you speak, if you start talking louder, that doesn't mean that the person's going to understand you. So don't do that.
Right.
Yeah, that's good to know as well. And if anyone else has anything that they have seen other people do, I am just scratching my brain now trying to think, but any other things that we've seen people do that they shouldn't? And if not, we'll jump to the next section.
I'm not thinking of too much else.
Yeah, as long as you're respectful to the people around you, you're not going to really have much problem.
Yeah, you definitely want to be respectful. You definitely want to be respectful in China. What comes around goes around, and I think we will leave that section at that then. All right, that's great general advice about actually stepping foot into China and what it's going to be like there. The next thing I wanted to talk about was transportation, hotels, money. Now we're, first of all, let's talk about how to get to China, right? Obviously, we've talked about visas and passports, but how do we actually get to Guangzhou? What is the airport that we need to go to? Is it train, airplane? Can you guys talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I would love to say that I'm the expert in this area, but I pretty much divert all of the travel issues, the airplanes, the trains, the planes, trains, and automobiles pretty much are all Peter's territory. So, so we're assuming for now that people are coming from the United States. What issues do they have to take into account in terms of the flights and arrival times and layovers, and whether or not they need to take a train to get to Guangzhou specifically?
So the most important thing is to remember the time change. It's roughly about 12 hours depending on the time of the year. So when you leave the United States, you have about a 12-hour flight plus about 12-hour time change, so you're always landing a day later than you would think. So you want to make sure when you're saying our trip starts on Wednesday, that you're arriving on Wednesday, not Thursday. So that's probably the most important thing, is just making sure that your landing time is 1 day plus. Then when it comes down to the main airport for Guangzhou is the Guangzhou airport. So you can look at flying directly into there. You can also look at, sometimes I've flown into Hong Kong and taken the Hong Kong train from Hong Kong right into Guangzhou. You can fly into Beijing and do a bullet train from Beijing, or you can fly from Beijing. Also, you can do the same from Shanghai. The most convenient will be flying directly into Guangzhou, But if you're looking at, I want to spend a few extra days and see Hong Kong, you can fly in a day early and take the train over. Just want to make sure that if you're landing in another airport and need to do a connecting flight, you have plenty of time to connect. So you'll probably have to go through Chinese customs and immigration, and you don't want to miss your flight.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Spoken.
So there are. I want to talk for a second about the different airport options. So like you were saying, flying direct to Guangzhou is always the easiest option, and the Guangzhou airport short code is C as in Canton. That will be the code that you want to type in when you're on your airline flights website to buy. But so usually, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but the connecting airports that I've usually flown in through are either like Seoul, South Korea, Japan, Beijing, or Shanghai. And I've found that Beijing and Shanghai are a super big pain in the butt usually to fly through. There's lots of cancellations. They're really big airports. Sometimes you have to transfer airports, like actually go to a different airport. So what are your thoughts on that?
I would agree with that. So Shanghai has two major airports that are both like equivalent to LAX or bigger. The problem is one airport is for all domestic flights, and the other airport is for. So you might fly into the airport and then need to take a train to the international, and it's a good hour-and-a-half to 2-hour train ride or bus ride.
Yes.
So you want to be careful with that connecting time. You almost need 12 hours to make sure you have enough time to get through. So I'd really recommend avoiding switching airports in Shanghai. If you can, I would recommend flying through like the Tokyo or Seoul, Korea. They're very smooth and easy to do, but sometimes you do have to change over in Beijing.
And Hong Kong is pretty good too, right? You can either fly from Hong Kong to Guangzhou, or you can take the train. So let's talk a second about the train from Hong Kong to Guangzhou.
So it's actually a very convenient train. I've done that now 2 times. You fly into Hong Kong. Hong Kong doesn't require a visa, so it's easy immigration. You just walk right on through. Take a quick taxi ride. It's 10-15 minutes to the train station. Trains are much easier to get through for security. 20-30 minutes, you're through security. You've got a bullet train, and easy to Joe with your customs, and you're right by the Ritz-Carlton and Canton Fair.
All right, sounds good. That is short and simple. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about? Lots of valuable tidbits there. Anything else you guys want to talk about in terms of actually getting to Guangzhou?
As far as whether it's better to come, you know what? Never mind. I think we covered it. I do want to ask a question real quick. I'm getting a lot of breakup in
Yeah, I'm
audio.
getting that as well.
So I wasn't sure if it was my download or if Peter, are you connected to Wi-Fi?
I'm connected to Wi-Fi, yeah.
Okay, so
Up till now, it hasn't been. I think it's been legible. Let's call it. But yeah, I know on that last bit you were saying Peter broke up a little bit, but I think we got most of the value out of that because I don't know how to repeat that. So.
You can put on subtitles.
Let me.
yeah, I suppose we could.
Yeah, we could. I'm going to put this up really quick so I know to edit this out. All right, here we go. All right, good to know on how to get over to Guangzhou. When I'm going over there, I know, say I land at the airport and I need to get to my hotel. Should I bring some cash with me to pay that taxi? Or, is it a good idea to get some cash converted on the way over or before I go over, just to have it? And if so, what kind of currency do you guys recommend?
So this is definitely a Peter type of question. He's kind of my personal ATM over in China. So Peter, what's the max amount of cash you can bring? How much do you usually bring? And what can people expect to need in terms of cash? You just muted yourself. You were already unmuted.
The max you can bring into China is $9,999 without having to declare it, but that is way more than you'll need. If you're coming on a trip with us, you're really only going to need money for simple taxi rides, gifts that you want to buy, and other souvenirs. So I would say $1,000 to $2,000 would be plenty of money. My last trip that I did where I paid for almost everything out of pocket and did 5 connecting flights, I spent about $5,000. So you do want to have some cash available, and either euros or USDs is going to be the most convenient to exchange. When you land in the Guangzhou airport, Shanghai airport, or Beijing, they'll have a currency exchange booth. It won't be the best conversion rate, but it's going to be better than anything you get in the United States airport. Exchange $100 or $200. You'll need Chinese currency for your taxi ride, and if you want to buy a drink or a snack when you first land. And the hotel can exchange currency.
Oh, sorry, go ahead,
Yeah,
Peter.
that kind of segues us into the next kind of question. So first of all, what is the Chinese currency? And well, I'll just answer that. It's RMB, right? RMB.
Which you'll also see as CNY sometimes, just to add a layer of confusion onto there.
Right. So sometimes I think that's the difference between calling it dollars versus USD, right? It's right. RMB is like USD and CNY.
CNY is like the yuan sign.
Yeah, yuan.
And it's called yuan as well.
Yuan and dollars, USD and RMB. So everybody says RMB, right? It's semantics. I don't know. But when and how should I change my money when I'm going into China? Like, you addressed that a little bit, but let's like really deep dive into that.
So me personally, I am probably not doing it how you guys do it, but I just go over and use the ATMs over there. So that is an option, but can you guys talk about what you've done?
Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've actually not used the ATMs. When I need to exchange a small amount of cash, I'll do it in the airport, so I have spending money. But then there's a lot of banks, because like Mark and Eve are saying, it's a very industrial city. They'll give you the best exchange rate. You just go to the bank, you give them whatever amount of cash you want to exchange, they'll tell you the exchange rate, you show them your passport, and they exchange the money on the spot. Your passport in China is needed for any exchanging of currency, and you actually have to carry it on you, and it's just a way to track the amount of money being exchanged.
Cool, good to know. And of course, there are ATMs over there, which I've always used, and people on our trips have used very often as well. ATMs are pretty plentiful over there. I'm not sure of the specifics of the exchange rate. I think it's actually dictated by your bank. But yeah, ATMs are another option. Not as reliable and efficient, or probably more efficient, but not as reliable as going to a bank. But I've seen very few issues with ATMs as well. So
yeah, and
does anyone have?
At most hotels, you can also exchange money. The exchange rate sometimes won't be quite as good if there's like a convenience fee, sort of, but you can exchange money there too. And Dot wanted me to mention also that if you're going to change money in Hong Kong, you got to watch out because Hong Kong uses a different local currency than the RMB. So they use like Hong Kong dollars. They call it something else too. So just make sure you're getting RMB if you're going to do that.
Yes, very valuable.
That covers pretty much everything as far as exchanges. If you do go to a bank, which we've done a couple times, it takes a while. They'll sit there, they'll ask for your passport, they'll give it back, they'll ask for it again, they'll question you, they'll write a bunch of stuff down. So you can get the best exchange rate at the bank, but usually now we just exchange at the hotel, I think, generally, or we'll use leftover money from the last trip that we went on.
Now, why don't you guys use ATMs? Do you just not trust them, or?
Peter?
The banks actually have given us the best exchange rate, and since between Ben and I and Dot, we go over so often, we'll actually exchange large amounts of currency and just keep using some of the same currency. So for us, like Ben mentioned, we spend a lot more time in the bank, but that extra half hour is worth it, because we might exchange larger amounts.
Right. Okay. So for most people listening to this call, ATM, airport, hotel, those are going to work just fine for most people, as well as the bank, obviously. But
Yes.
okay. All right. So that covers actually getting some currency. And can people use their credit cards over there as well? I know me personally, I just look for a card with 0% foreign transaction fees and use that a lot of places. Have you guys used credit cards over there pretty freely?
Yeah, we use credit cards quite a bit over there, although there are some caveats to using credit cards in China that maybe Peter can talk about for a second. We have had run into a few issues.
So the key is your accepted, also your like U.S. 5-star type of hotels. So if you're going to bring one card, I'd recommend a Visa or MasterCard. You'll have the highest chance of being accepted.
Okay, great. And Peter, you were breaking up a little bit at the beginning there. I'm guessing the beginning of that was don't use American Express.
Yeah, American Express will be the hardest one for them to accept.
Cool. And yeah, just
Yeah,
look
Peter,
at Sorry, I was just gonna say, just look up the foreign transaction fee on your credit card. You may already have a credit card that is going to work over there and not charge you extra fees. The really important thing to me is always 0% foreign transaction fees. And I'll make sure to list some, good cards that we've all used with this video. But I think that's the real thing to nail home. And obviously, you want it to be a major brand like Visa, MasterCard. So, does anyone else have anything to add in there? Sounds good. Well, the next thing I was going to...
Although there is something... So, Mark, maybe you can shed some light on this. The Chinese credit card system is based on Diners Club and MasterCard. Is there something to that, or is that nonsense?
No, that's correct. They use Union Pay and other things that we're not familiar with mostly, but what I would recommend for anybody is at least to contact their credit card company if they're going to choose one, to let them know that they're going to be in China, so that they are also aware of your activity, so that they won't flag it and freeze your account. Even though they might be able to use it in this country, they still need to make them aware about it, because it's very often that some people do get frozen out of their account. They just have to call somebody, and then they'll unlock it. But it's important to at least prepare that once if they can.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've been locked out of my credit card, and I had to, luckily there was an online system, and I was at the Ritz, so I could just log right in and say, oh no, it's cool, I'm in China. But you definitely want to tell your credit card company that you're going to be in China during these dates.
Exactly. I would also, as far as that's concerned, if you can use the ATMs in China as well, try to see with your bank if they have any relationships with the Chinese banks, because many times you can get 0 transaction fees and the best and favorable rates if they do that. So it's not available for every bank, but just check with your bank and see if it's available.
Cool. All right. If anyone has anything else to add on credit cards, let us know. And my next question here. All right. So we've landed in China. We have currency. We've talked about ATMs a little bit, but how do I actually get the cab to go to the hotel, right? So I'm sitting at the airport, just sitting outside. How do I actually get how do I call that cab, right? And what do I need to pay attention to when getting in that cab?
Yeah, so we have gone through, Peter and I have gone through when we've gone to the Canton Fair, both the Canton Airport, the Guangzhou Airport, and the train station. And the first time we went there, we really had no idea what we were doing. We changed some money, then we walked around and we found some random guy offering to take us where we wanted to go, which turned out he led us through some back alleys and things, and we got into, I don't know if it was a van, I can't remember, but we got into an illegal taxi. And like Peter was saying, we ended up paying too much. But there are proper ways to go about getting taxis, and most people are going to be coming in through the airport. So I know Dot has done it very recently. What was the process like for you going about getting a cab at the Guangzhou airport?
Well, it's really you just follow the wayfinding signs. They've got the little taxi emblem on them, so you'll get your luggage. and you'll go outside of the security barrier where there's like a little fence area that keeps people out of the baggage claim. So you'll go out of there, and then there's just signs that say taxi. I believe they say them in English in Guangzhou just because it's so commercial there, but they do have the picture for sure that looks like a taxi. And you just go outside, and there's like a very specific place where you get them. So you'll know that you're getting an official taxi because there should be a guard there that's helping, or somebody in a uniform. I don't know if it's a guard or if they work for the taxi company or the airport, but there's somebody that'll point you to the cab that you're supposed to get in. And there's kind of like a line and a system that you go through. And on your way there, you might encounter some people that'll say like Uber or taxi or something like that. And those are usually the ones that you want to avoid because they probably aren't an official transportation person.
Yeah, just go
Sorry,
ahead.
I know when we get a cab ride, you know, within Guangzhou to get around Guangzhou, we want to be careful because they don't speak English, right, or at least that well. Is it similar with these cab rides from the airport or the major transportation hubs? Like, do I need to write down the address of my hotel in Chinese, or are they going to know where it's at?
Yeah, you'll definitely want to have it down in Chinese so you can show the driver. And they can read it in Mandarin. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
I mean, I've had personally, you know, troubles trying to communicate, going back and forth from the airport when my flight was canceled. But luckily, like I said, with the Sourcing Summit people, we give everybody an image on their phone, send it over WeChat that says, take me to this place, take me to that place, you know, like a card that you can use whenever you get into these cabs. So it is a good idea to have something like that for your hotel or the main places that you want to go, the Canton Fair, the airport, things like that. I think that's pretty much generally it. Now, like I said, Peter, maybe you can talk about this, maybe Mark and Eve can talk about this, getting a cab from the train station. When we're staying at the Ritz, we generally probably don't need a cab because it's so close, but yeah, maybe you can talk about that.
Okay, if you're getting a taxi from the airport to your hotels, if your hotel in the city, the fee is should be under 200 RMB, so that's $30. You should not take the taxi if they ask for like a one price without using a meter.
Okay, great. And any other points there?
Yeah, the meter in the taxis, it like physically flips down, so that's how it's activated. One time we had a driver that didn't flip it down until we like pointed at it and made sure that he did it. So it'll be standing up when it's not metering, I guess, is that what it is? And then they flip it down and it starts keeping time.
Yeah, it will make a beeping sound.
Okay, yeah. So that's
so just point at the meter and say, hey,
meter.
meter.
But what you said about having like information written down is very important because if you can't speak to them, there's no way that you can communicate this information.
Okay, good to
So
know.
is the taxi? Sorry, is the taxi situation any different at the train station than it is at the airport? Is it just a taxi stand that's pretty obvious?
There's usually designated areas for the taxi stand, and you'll have those people walking up to you. So always go to those designated areas and ignore.
Go in the line.
Yeah, go in line. Even though it seems like a long line, it's the safer way to go.
And it moves pretty fast. It's usually gated too, isn't it? Right? They have like the Disneyland gates that you go through.
Exactly. And they move fast because there's hundreds of taxis.
Okay, great. Well, that covers the... Yeah, go ahead.
When you book your hotel online, they should give you a reservation email or a confirmation, whatever, and they should have their address on it in Chinese. So you might need to take a picture of that and save it on your phone so you can show it to the taxi driver.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So that'll be useful to have with you. And then is there anything else we've talked about, where to get those cabs, what to watch out for when you're in it? Anything else that we're missing there about the cabs?
I guess that's all. Just mind your luggage in the trunk. Just remember to take them out.
Don't leave
Yes.
anything behind, right?
And
Definitely don't leave anything behind. I don't think you're getting anything back if you leave it behind, as Peter told us.
and if you want to get around in the city, when you get there, then you can ask your hotel concierge to write down the name of the places that you want to go in both Chinese and English, so you don't mess it up. And you can always show it to the taxi driver. It's easier for you.
Okay.
Yeah, and one last
All right,
thing
great.
before we move on. The last time Dot and I flew into Guangzhou and we got into the taxi stand, they tried to push us into the same cab as a guy who was already in there, and he had a full thing of luggage, and they tried to get me to put my 50-pound suitcase on my lap in the back of the car, and I was like, no. We'll get the next one. So don't just let them force you into situations. Just be like, no, we'll get the next one, thanks. So you don't have to do whatever they say.
Yes. Good point there as well. All right, cool. And then in terms of, most of the people listening to this call will actually be going with us on Sourcing Summit, so you guys won't have to know this stuff. But for the people who aren't going with our group and who want to, go solo, what are some good places to stay? Obviously, we stay at the Ritz-Carlton, which in my opinion is the best hotel there. But what are some other hotels that people might stay by, and where is the actual Canton Fair complex?
Yeah, I'm gonna lead off on this one for a second with talking specifically about the hotels. So I'm not sure exactly what you call the location that the complex is in, so I'll let Mark and Eve talk about that in just a second. But in terms of hotels, so people who are going by themselves and they're trying to book their hotels. So you got a few options. I'm not going to talk about obviously every single hotel that you could possibly stay in, but there are a few good options. So number one, if convenience is the biggest factor and you don't care about money, you can stay at the Westin, which is the very large hotel with the flower emblem at the top of the tower that is actually attached to the Canton Fair complex. And a lot of times we will enter through the Westin Hotel just because it's so convenient. And just like the Ritz-Carlton, the Westin is like a mini USA, right? Everything's really, really nice, and the Western toilets and Western prices. I think I paid $7 for a Coke Zero there one time. And so it's really nice, and this is what I call your home base when you're at the Canton Fair. If you ever get into trouble or you got to go number 2, you head back to the Westin, right? that's your little home away from home. So that's always an option, but it'll run you like $700 a night if I'm not incorrect. Anybody can chime in there if that's not right. But then there are other hotels around there. Next down the line, I think, would probably be Shangri-La. Probably a little less expensive, maybe a little less nice. I don't know about the amenities there or the VPN. Like in the Westin, the VPN is just like the Ritz-Carlton, right? But Shangri-La, I'm not really sure, but I've heard it's a really nice hotel. A lot of people have great things to say about it. Also, the Langham Hotel is right next to the Westin, so it's really close to the fair. Have never stayed there, don't know too much about it. And then, of course, we have the Hefun Hotel. So the Hefun, which is, I don't know if this spelling is right, H-E-F-U-N, or there might be a Y in there somewhere. Mark, Eve, you can chime in here. What is it?
Double E. H-E-E-F-U-N.
H-E-E-F-U-N. So it's sort of like a long-term hotel that has like a kitchenette and a little common area, and it's pretty nice. It lacks some of the amenities of the really nice hotels, but if you're looking to get somewhere close and pretty nice, then you can stay there. The problem is that there's not a whole lot of places to eat around the Canton Fair because it's very industrial. It's not like there's not a lot of restaurants or bars or convenience stores or things around there. The other one that Peter and I have actually stayed in, we stayed in there the first time, is very weirdly called the Yiwu Comitel. Just like Yiwu, where all the wholesale markets are, they also have a hotel that is called Yiwu, Y-I-W-U, Comitel, C-O-M-M-A-T-E-L. and it's pretty cheap. I think it was like 150 bucks a night. It's right next to the fair, walking distance. Has a breakfast buffet. It's not. I mean, I was a little worried about brushing my teeth at the time before I knew anything. Like it's not perfect, but it's okay. It's not bad. They don't speak great English there, but it's serviceable if there's nothing else around. So those are the hotels other than the Ritz-Carlton, which we're going to talk about in a second, that I would look into. Peter, Mark, Eve, you guys have anything else to add to the hotel options?
Well, Ben, sorry, go ahead, Eve.
And other than Key Fund, there are a lot of service apartments in that same building. Key Fund is just a few floors in the building. If you want to book those apartments, you can go on like booking.com to search for service apartments. There are a lot will show up on there.
Yeah, the major thing with what you just mentioned about those hotels are they are within walking distance of the complex. Other hotels are located in the center part of the city where there's a lot more things to do other than just the show, and I think that's what we're going to talk about now. Is that what you're going to mention?
Yeah, exactly. So in the part of town that we stay in, the Ritz-Carlton, and right next door is the Four Seasons. If you're looking to, be as upscale as the Ritz, you could also look into the Four Seasons. But those two hotels are in a pretty nice area of town, really. Like I was saying, it's right next to the Opera House, which, I don't know, it looks like the Ministry of Magic or something out of Harry Potter. It's a pretty cool building, and right next to it is this promenade that kind of leads up to the river. Then right across the river is the Canton Tower, and the promenade has these light-up squares all over it, and right behind that is an underground mall. So it's really a cool place to go, and there's lots of bars in the area, lots of restaurants. So that's one of the reasons we like to stay there. So at the Ritz-Carlton, for those of you staying with us in the Sourcing Summit on our trip, there's, everything of a major hotel would have, all the amenities, including, massages. There's a spa. There's a outdoor pool that's kind of on the mid-level. It's not on the roof, but it's like mid-level with open areas. They've got ping pong tables. I love ping pong, right? They've got a gym, workout area. They have restaurants. They have, I don't know, what else do they have? Eve, you are very experienced with the Ritz. Pitch the Ritz to us a little bit.
Bring a swimming suit. That's what I have to say. There's a heated pool. Outside heated pool, actually. It's pretty nice.
It is a nice
Yeah,
pool.
I've used that pool a lot, and it's quite relaxing. And
The Ritz
generally
also has
just
one of the most incredible bars in the world, the Churchill Bar. The place is just flooded with incredible areas to hang out, and yeah.
Yeah, you got to get an old fashioned at the Churchill Bar. It's quite good. Also, one of my favorite cars was parked out in front of the Ritz one time, the McLaren. I think it was a McLaren F1. It was pretty awesome. But beyond that, the staff at the Ritz, if you need directions to anything, if you need help with anything, it's crazy. They are there to help you with almost anything you could possibly imagine, and they all speak excellent English. The rooms are amazing. The showers and bathrooms are amazing. Everything's really great about it. And furthermore, a lot of people, they want to stay close to the Canton Fair because they've heard horror stories about trying to get into the Canton Fair if you're not close enough to just walk. And to some extent, that is true in the outlying hotels that are not the major hotels like the Ritz-Carlton. The Ritz-Carlton runs a very generous bus shuttle schedule to get you to and from the Canton Fair. So we've never really had any problem with that. It's free, it's fast, not really an issue. So that's really a lot of the reasons that we decided to stay at the Ritz-Carlton. But
Yeah,
those
and
are
I
all
think
those other
that's-
hotels.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing to highlight too. Is we're not just staying at the Ritz-Carlton because we just love to live luxurious lifestyles. The Ritz-Carlton with the group rate that we get it's not as crazy expensive as it would be for someone to go alone. and it's just the way to do this kind of trip to China, to Guangzhou, an industrial area of China. You know, a lot of people want to just do the cheapest hotel they can find, or an Airbnb or something. And I mean, Ben, can you talk about, I mean, you already have been, but can you talk about why an Airbnb or a cheap hotel is just not the right solution for a trip like this?
Well, let me start this by saying, if you lost your laptop in a cab that picked you up from your hotel at the Hefan, at the Yiwu Comitel, at the, I don't even know, wherever else, they're not going to be able to look at the security footage, and they're not going to take the time to track down and call the taxi cab driver and try to get that back for you. So that is the kind of thing that makes it worth it to stay at some place like the Ritz. There's a value add there that if you get into trouble, you have somebody to go to. Now, as far as the Airbnb, I have not been brave enough to try that. Maybe Mark, Eve can talk a little bit about that.
First of all, most of them don't speak English, so it's not easy to communicate with them when you have a problem, and I don't know how willing they are to help you when you're in trouble. So those Airbnb apartments are in the city, but you don't know, it's not easy to get to because it's not, it's like those communities that the taxi driver might not be able to find it, first of all. And also, again, it's like,
for the more adventurous people, it's okay. If they can trudge through all that, and you know,
not for your first time visit to China.
Wouldn't recommend it, but you could save some money. But then you're going to pay for it in other situations, right?
Yeah, it's not that it's necessarily dangerous. It's just there's a communication issue that will be a problem.
Like even with those hotels that are close to the thing, it's convenient for, you know, where you stay and when you have to do number two, like you said, Ben. But as far as like eating, you're going to be held hostage to this, you know, because most of the places will close at earlier than you expect, and then you won't have any food. And then if you do eat food, you might have to eat at the Westin, and they have like an $80 buffet, which is, you know, throws a lot of people off when they're not prepared for something like that.
Yeah. And I think if you're going over there for business, if you're going over there to grow your business and to source products, you know, the 10, 20 bucks a day you save at an Airbnb is going to get eaten right back up in the transportation costs, because these Airbnbs are way farther away. The transportation costs, the extra amenities, the time spent just trying to figure out how to get from here to there. I mean, for a trip like this, if you're going to the Canton Fair to grow your e-commerce business, I really think a high-end hotel is the way to go, because you don't have time to deal with that stuff. You're there to grow your business, so let's get the most time focused on that we can.
Yeah, they're there to make decisions about products. You're not trying to make decisions about is it okay for me to, you know, walk to this place, or where am I going to find food, and am I going to eat tonight? You know, so if you're going to go to the Canton Fair, we recommend staying somewhere close, walking distance, or staying at one of the major hotels like the Ritz-Carlton that has very good shuttle access to and from the Canton Fair. And while we're on the topic of shuttle access, we've covered pretty much every method of transportation around Guangzhou except for the metro and Uber and Lyft type services. So maybe we could talk a little bit about using the metro, not necessarily to get all over Guangzhou, but let's talk specifically about getting to and from your hotel and the Canton Fair using the metro. Let's start with the Ritz-Carlton, and maybe Mark Eve can talk about this.
Okay. Well, the metro is very convenient in the city. I mean, especially if you use like the metro card, which you just have to put a deposit on, which is very cheap, and then from there you just swipe a card and you can go to any location on the map. So using the metro is very simple. Once you get a hang of it, it's very simple to use. So you know, I would recommend it if you have no other way to get around. It's a smart way to use the system.
Yeah, I'd really say that the metro in Guangzhou and China in general, pretty much exactly the same as any major U.S. city or European city, if not easier. And the only tough part can be actually buying that card for the first time. But you know, every time I've been there, the population itself and the people of China and Guangzhou are more than happy to come help you out, and I've never had a problem. You know, even if I'm confused trying to get that card, usually there's someone right next to me there to help me grab it and go. So.
Yeah, in general, the Metro has been great for us, for our group, getting around places. There is, I think, a caveat to that, though, and at the end of the Canton Fair, at the end of the day, the Metro can be really crowded, right? Like it can be a madhouse. And we've had some adventurous people on our trip who decided not to take the last shuttle and just catch the Metro back, which is fine. You can do that from the Canton Fair complex, but you can also catch cabs. They're sort of all over the exits of the Canton Fair. Once again, you know, you gotta do the whole thing where you say, here's where I want to go, and you show them the picture and the translation and everything. And we've had some kind of fun misadventures with cabs outside of the Canton Fair. But if you go to the Westin, remember your little home away from home. If you go to the Westin, you got a taxi stand that they technically will get their guests first for Westin guests only, but you can catch a cab there and have the taxi cab stand guy kind of tell the driver where you want to go. So once again, all roads lead to the Westin if you're at the Canton Fair.
Nice. All right. And then so that pretty much covers everything with getting around Guangzhou.
Wait,
is there anything else you want to mention there?
Yeah. Uber and Lyft, right? What's the name of Uber in China now? It's like Udi or something?
Didi. D-I-D-I.
Didi.
What?
D-I-D-I. Like D as in dog. So Didi. Yeah.
Didi. Okay. So basically, you have to be able to read and type Chinese in order to use it, right?
Yeah.
Right. And the driver will call you, and they don't speak English.
The driver will always call, even if
So if you don't speak Mandarin or some other, Cantonese or something, Uber does not work the same way that it does in other countries, where you can just like pull up Google Maps and like say Uber me here or there or Lyft me here or there. So don't count on Uber or Lyft to get around Guangzhou or the rest of China, correct?
Right.
That's correct.
Right.
Absolutely. I would say cabs are just as easy, so don't be scared. But yeah, don't use Uber. Cool. And what would people be going to do, I guess? What are some fun things to do? I know we've talked about this a little bit. There's some absolutely awesome bars and clubs out there just because it is a business city. So some of the most high-end lounges and things like that I've ever seen. Had great times there. What are some other things? We talked about the Canton Tower. Is there anywhere that we can go that we haven't talked about? For instance, I know, Ben, a lot of the times you're actually doing a party there with the Sourcing Summit. So, I mean, that's definitely one thing to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, apart from the touristy things to do, right, there are different meetups that you can do with. So this is the Canton Fair is the mecca of import-export e-commerce people. And even more so over the last few years, it's become more and more Amazon people coming in, more and more US-based or Western-based e-commerce entrepreneurs coming in. And so as that's grown, there have become a lot of meetups and get-togethers, and like you were saying, the Sourcing Summit tries to throw some sort of meetup or even a big epic party, like the party that we did at the top of the Westin one year that got written up about in different e-commerce websites and blogs.
I mean, you even had the head of Amazon FBA UK there, so that was a crazy one.
People were saying they talked to this guy, and I was like, why didn't you introduce me? But I met some reps from Alibaba that gave me a secret, a little thumb drive that had a list of recommended suppliers on there and everything. So we had some very interesting people showing up. So we try to do something like that every time we go. But furthermore, also, Mark's friend, Chris Davies, also holds a get-together that everybody should try to get to. We go every single time at, what is the name of the pub? McLaren's?
McLaren?
Macaulay's.
Oh, Macaulay.
Macaulay's
Which is like a 10-minute walk from the Ritz-Carlton. So we always just walk over there and join his group. He's been there forever, and he's been in e-commerce for a long time, so he's a really, really good guy to know, and everybody everybody likes to show up to that party, and so we try to schedule our get-togethers around that, and he kind of works with us so we don't overlap too much, so everybody can get benefit of all the different meetups and parties and get-togethers that are around there. But
Yeah, that's
there are
great.
also,
And
like you were saying, there are some other really great bars down there, some great restaurants, and Mark and Eve can probably talk a little bit more about the hot spots around Guangzhou.
Within walking distance is what's the name of the street again?
The Xingshan Road Bar Street. That's the major bar street that you can find in the city for expat. There's food there. Bars, all kinds of bars, Irish, Thai food, Cantonese food.
Yeah, basically it's where all the expats like to hang out, and the majority of the people from the Canton Fair do like to go there at night, so it's a good place to meet a lot of sellers as well, just randomly if
And
you go to anywhere there.
that's around the Opera House, Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons area. Is that right?
Right.
Again, it's within walking distance of where we stay, so yes, it's another reason why it's good to go with us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's all good stuff to know, and you guys pretty much just laid down all of the hot parties for e-commerce entrepreneurs to be at. So I'm sure lots of people will be at those parties this time around, even outside of our group. But moving on, I guess, so we're at the Canton Fair, right? Let's just put ourselves back there. We're out of the parties. We're back at the Canton Fair. How do we actually get samples at the Canton Fair, right? Are we buying samples there? Are we, can people send samples to us, and how do we get those things home?
Yeah, this is a pretty common question, and so samples are, everybody wants to get samples, right? So you can do samples a couple ways when you're in China. You're staying at your hotel. Let's say it's the Ritz-Carlton. And you've contacted a few manufacturers that you've found on Alibaba, like we recommend, before going to the Canton Fair. So you've kind of got you're crawling that web, looking for those really good suppliers that scale, as I like to say in the earlier videos that maybe some of you have access to. But you're looking for those suppliers that scale, and you want to get those samples sent to you while you're at your hotel. So you can tell them, if they're not going to the Canton Fair, you can just ask them to send a bunch of samples to the address of the hotel, and put attention, your name, or whatever, and they'll do that most of the time. And a lot of times they'll do it for free. And whereas if you're ordering samples back to the United States, sometimes you're paying $150 just for a small little box to get back to you. So it can really kind of save a lot of money doing that. So you can order it from people who aren't going to the Canton Fair, or if you are at the Canton Fair, samples, they're a little bit hit or miss. Generally, they don't give out samples during the main parts of the fair because they don't want to run out of products, right? They want to be able to show the products to everybody that's walking by. So it can be a little bit hard to convince people to let go of their samples. But in the last day or two of the fair, and definitely when they're packing up, you can a lot of times get a bunch of samples. And the toy area is a big sample time that people like to grab those samples. But in terms of optimizing getting samples, you definitely want to contact people before you head over to China to get those samples sent over to your hotel before that. So I don't know if anybody wants to add anything else, but
yeah, I think that covers a lot of it. And Ben, I know you've actually run into issues personally with this. How do you bring those? So say I get samples at the Canton Fair. How do I actually bring those back home? And I know Dot, Ben, Peter, you guys have all had issues with this. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So the first time we went to the Canton Fair, I went to we went to a wholesale market, the One Link, I think it was called, in Guangzhou, and I found a product that I wanted to do. So we got them to put together 150 units into a box that I took back on the airplane. I just checked it as baggage, and everything was all well and good until I got to Chicago, and I had to go through customs, and I went through, and I was like, yeah, I got these. I'm not gonna. I won't say what it was. It's kind of funny, but he was like, "Oh, okay. Are they mutilated?" And I was like, "Well, that's kind of a weird question, but no. He goes, okay, so what are you going to do with those? I was like, I'm going to sell them. I was very naive at this point, right? Like, I didn't know those were all the wrong answers to this question. And so basically, he was asking me if they were mutilated. That means that he doesn't have to check them in as like sellable goods. It's not a duty. You don't charge a duty to take these into the United States. But if they are mutilated, they're sellable. Okay, what are you going to do with them? They're samples. It's like, no, I said I was going to sell them. So that means they have to have an invoice, and they have to have you have to pay duties, which is fine. Okay, so he sent me to the customs line where they check you out and they make you look like a criminal, right? So that's where I was standing while Peter just blew through customs to his next flight. And so I'm standing there in line. This guy's looking at me, and he's asking me all these questions, and it turns out that I didn't have the correct invoice that I needed. Bill of sale. What's the correct terminology, Dot?
It is commercial invoice. Just a commercial invoice, or
you need a commercial invoice with commercial invoice, bill of sale with specific information on it, like the tariff codes, the harmony codes, so they can figure out how much duty to charge you. So we're going to make this available in the notes, but Dot, we have a specific rundown of the information, the minimum information required. If you want to take products back, like if you go to a wholesale market or if you get enough samples from the Canton Fair somehow that you want to take it back and sell, you have to have this invoice with this minimum information on it.
Yeah, so it's kind of 9 items is what they have laid out on the Border Patrol website, Customs and Border Patrol. You have to describe the item clearly, list how many you have, state the value, the country of origin, where you purchased it, the name of the business or purchase that sold it to you, the location of that business or person, the name of, this is a lot of things, sorry, the name of the, name and address of the buyer, so you, and then the list of the U.S. address of the person or business that the goods are being shipped to. So you have to present that at Customs and Border Patrol when they're clearing the goods. You have to present that invoice.
Yeah, and if you don't have it, like me, they can either seize the goods, fine you, or just let you through and give you a warning, which is what they did with me. So I have a black mark on my record in terms of customs.
Don't we all? All right, cool. Well, that covers a lot of the logistics of all of this. So I think we're kind of in the home stretch here. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the Canton Fair. And in a second here, I actually want to go through and give you guys some questions about the fair itself and how to maximize our return on investment from going to the fair. But before I do that, can you guys really quickly take me through what is different between going to the Canton Fair versus going to my supplier's factory or going to Yiwu? Is there any difference between the actual logistics of traveling to those different places?
Yeah, so as far as the logistics go, it's going to be a lot easier to get around the Canton Fair and get to and from Guangzhou than it is a Yiwu or any other factory tours or anything like that. So that's really going to be the primary difference in terms of logistics. But in terms of sourcing products, it's all about the likelihood of the possibility of finding a supplier that will meet your needs as you grow and scale your business. And the likelihood of finding that, as some of you may have heard me mention earlier, the likelihood of finding a supplier that scales goes like this. Wholesale markets and Yiwu, knocking randomly on doors of factories in Guangzhou, then the Canton Fair and other trade shows. So that's kind of my feelings on it. So the Canton Fair has the way more high likelihood that you will find a supplier that will scale with your business. So that is really kind of what we're focusing on and why we're talking so much about the Canton Fair.
Makes sense. And I think going to those other marketplaces, you're going to have less amenities. You're going to have more little things chipping away at your trip, rather than you getting out there and sourcing products and building relationships. So I think that's one of the reasons why we like Canton so much. is it is really a business city made for people doing business. Whereas a lot of these other places, just a lot more friction between you actually growing your business and doing what you came there to do. So yeah, I think that really wraps up that section for us pretty well. And with that, I have a few questions for you guys on the Canton Fair itself. It sounds like we're all pretty big fans of Canton, and obviously we've all been to Canton Fair many times. So for people who haven't been to the Canton Fair, I do want to give a brief kind of 20,000-foot view. What is the Canton Fair? It's people probably know it's the world's largest trade fair, but can we talk about like what it is, who goes to it, what's the point of it, all those different things?
Yeah. I mean, we touched on a little bit of this randomly, but we can condense it here a little bit. So what's the Canton Fair? It started, I think, in the 1950s. Was it 52, 53, something like that? It happens twice a year. It just had in 2016, in the fall of 2016, was the 120th anniversary, which means 60 years of the Canton Fair. So it must have started in 1956. But it is, like you said, the largest trade show in China, and it mostly has Chinese manufacturers. I think you'll see some manufacturers coming from other areas of the world, but generally it's mostly Chinese manufacturers. And like I said, it's the mecca of import, export, and e-commerce people. And there are 3 phases to the Canton Fair, and we typically, in the Sourcing Summit, we will go to phase 2, which has the most eclectic mix of products out of all 3 phases, and usually it's the most classic Amazon products. Like the criteria for Amazon are most classically in phase 2. Smaller items, home goods, kitchen, toys, health and personal care, just like a ton of different stuff. But
yeah, and just to cut you off really quick, I mean, Canton Fair is so massive. I mean, it's everything. So there's 3 phases over the course of 3 weeks. This thing is a massive event, and it's everything from full, like, you can buy your own machinery for your own factory. There's cars. There's like everything you can think of. So phase 2, I think, is really the most consumer friendly and Amazon friendly, and that's why the Sourcing Summit always goes there.
Yeah, I'm going to bring Mark into this in just a second to talk about what kind of things we can expect at the different phases. But just to give you an idea about the size of this complex. So there are 3 buildings. The 2 main buildings are, I want to say, like 5 football fields in area, something like that. And Mark, you can correct me if you think that's a little off. And people who don't know football fields, sorry, that's all I have to gauge it. But it's about 5 football fields, each building in area, with 4 or 5 levels in each building. And then the 3rd building is about half that size. So it is massive, and it's connected. Those 2 buildings and that 1 smaller building are connected by a skywalk that is approximately, I don't know, like a mile long or something like that. So it is,
honestly.
It's crazy massive. So that's the scale that we're talking about. Now, Mark, if you could maybe jump in and talk very briefly, about the different products that we can see at phase 1, 2, and 3. I know that we can go on the Canton Fair website and specifically search specific products and suppliers that we want to find during those phases, but those aren't always the most accurate, so we have to speak in generality. So maybe if you could talk about what we can expect at phase 1, 2, and 3.
Sure. During phase 1, mostly automotive and, as Will mentioned, like construction materials or machinery, as well as like things like spas and more of the bigger things like garden supplies, patio, and things like those. Phase 2, I would say, is more like you were mentioning also, was a consumer-friendly thing. So this is where the majority of the new people who come into the Canton Fair is recommended to attend, just because it has the most wide variety. It's so common that actually some of the people from phase 1 and 3 also have some booths there as well, depending on what they want to get their exposure and if they can afford it. And then phase 3 is mainly like fashion. So people who are interested in fashion, such as shoes, clothing, and all that, and outdoor gear, that's when they would attend that. So that's the general consensus of everything.
Yeah, and really you got to look at specifically what's going to be at every fair, because there will be stuff mixed in there. That's just speaking generally. We can't say exactly what's going to be at every phase because it's just such a wide variety at all times. So just keep that in mind.
Sure. And as far as the
Absolutely.
actual square meter or feet is 470,000 square feet, if you want to try to measure that out.
Yeah, that is crazy. I think the last stat I saw was 60,000 booths and 60,000 different people selling things there. So just crazy.
Yeah. The thing that throws people off is, they get excited, they try to get brochures from every booth, and then they realize it's like forever. I mean,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
you
Good
can
luck.
literally,
I hope you didn't bring anything with because you got about 700 pounds of catalogs to send back.
we have a
Stuff.
long stack of people taking pictures of all the catalogs they have to leave behind because they just can't bring it all.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Cool. And then in terms of, we've talked about a little bit the buyer's badge, and does that buyer's badge just get us into Canton Fair? Does it do anything else for us? And you might even want to tell people how that buyer's badge, I think, lasts 10 years, right?
Actually,
I think is it forever? I thought it was forever.
I think it is forever, but most people like yourself or myself also misplace it. So you have to, take it as it. But there are perks to it. Like the more you check in, you actually have some benefits. So after a certain amount of attendance, VIP status, which is like you get some free tickets for some free lunches in the VIP section in the complex.
Yeah, good to know. I'm sure you guys are getting very close to the VIP status. So, and obviously we're gonna be like walking around talking to suppliers. Do people want to be wearing a suit for this, or is like jeans and a t-shirt okay, or what's kind of the dress code there?
There's no official dress code, but it's all about being comfortable. And some people just feel more comfortable in their full suit. So if that's you, then it's okay to do that. But we don't recommend that. We usually, as Dad mentioned, bring your walking shoes because usually hit 20,000 steps minimum in a day. So just keep that in mind when you're walking.
Yeah, me the first couple of days I wore like khakis and maybe a polo or a button down untucked. But then after a while, I ended up wearing sneakers and a pair of shorts and a regular shirt with a sling backpack, and it had no effect on who talked to me or who gave me their card or catalog or I didn't feel like people were judging me. So it was all about being it gets pretty hot. It gets pretty hot in there. The air conditioning cannot keep up. So dress comfortably.
I sat next to a lady on the bus on the way there one time. She was a buyer for a major company. I can't remember what it was, but she was in like Nike tennis shoes and leggings and a tank top with a baseball cap on. So
that's the way to do it. And for anyone who's going with us on the trip too, feel free to jump in the private community, and you can look at photos from the previous trips and see exactly what people are wearing. You can ask in there. That's definitely something you can kind of crowdsource from previous attendees for people going with us on Sourcing Summit. So that covers the dress code and everything. Obviously, we talked about how the Canton Fair is 3 weeks long, right? And we're going just for phase 2, so we're only going to be there for a few days. But what's kind of like the open and closing hours of this thing, right? What days can we actually go? When is it open? When is it closed? And with each day, when should we aim to arrive? When should we expect to leave? Do we want to beat traffic? Anything like that?
I think Mark would be a good one to answer this. I know. So the first, the fair lasts a certain number of days, which I'll let Mark talk about, and then on the last day it closes early. So there's some things to take into account for that. So Mark, maybe go ahead and take it away in terms of like how many days does it last, and when are the hours, and the last day, what are the special circumstances?
Sure. Each phase has 5 days to it, and the last day is actually like a half day, and they take it seriously because they get penalties for leaving late. So they'll actually close a little bit earlier. So don't expect to come in later, because I know some people try to come in, like around 10 or 11, and basically they're closing at 12:30 on the last day. So you don't want to do that. But for every phase, or every time in the morning, you can go there as early as 8:30 or 9. It officially opens at like 9 o'clock, and it runs all the way till 6. But they already start to close shop around 5:30. So you're planning your day around an 8-hour day or so.
Good to know. And I know this is something that we all don't do, but for people listening to this call, people going over there that are just starting their e-commerce business, going to the fair on that last day, you'll see a lot of suppliers who just don't want to ship the product that they've brought back to their factory. This is something I've seen pretty frequently. But if you're going to get free samples at the Canton Fair, it's probably going to be on that last day because a lot of people just want to get rid of the products. So just something to think about. And have you guys seen that as well?
Yes, that's correct. The last day, if they do sell or give away samples, that would be the time when they do it. But as you know, everybody kind of knows that too, so you have to be there early. If you're going to do that, you better write it and mark it down, and always mark down the booths because you think you know where you're going, and then when you go back the next day or whatever you go back, you won't find it unless you know exactly where you need to go.
Yes,
absolutely. Along that same line, you have the smartphone with the internet and with the WeChat and all that stuff. Use the camera phone. Use it like crazy. Take pictures of the booth. Take selfies with the people in the booth so you can send it to them later when you contact them saying, hey, remember me. Write down on little Post-it notes the price per unit and the shipping cost or whatever, the customizations, and hold it up next to the product and take a picture. Your camera phone is a very useful tool in terms of remembering the products and the people and the booths that were important to you.
And doing it quickly, right? Because you don't want to sit there writing down a bunch of information because there's 60,000 booths. So we got to move, right?
That's true. And if you are coming on the Sourcing Summit or going through this course, we will teach you how to write down that information quickly and get the information you need into our cheat sheets that you can use while you're at the Canton Fair. But, that's neither here nor there.
Right. Cool.
What else we got?
So this covers a lot of stuff. I think we've covered how many buildings are at the actual Canton Fair. We've covered how to get that buyer's badge. Is the buyer's badge all we need to get into the fair complex? I guess what is kind of the ticketing gate, per se, of the fair itself?
Yeah, so the best place, in my opinion, to enter the Canton Fair is through the West End. They have a sky bridge that connects the West End to the Canton Fair complex, and it's generally the easiest, quickest to get through. But if you're taking the shuttle, you'll go through the main entrance, which is usually pretty crowded. You'll be tempted to go. You can walk a little bit past the main entrance and go further down to this gate that's marked with purple, and that is actually for suppliers to enter. So we actually entered in there a few times, and we got really dirty looks. So I don't know if I would do that many more times, but you can go through the main entrance where the shuttle's left off. Or if you're walking, or if you take a cab, you can go directly to the West End and enter, and they'll scan your badge. Then they will have you send everything through a metal detector. Not a metal detector. They'll have you send everything through an X-ray machine, and then you will walk through a metal detector. The metal detector will always go off, and they will always let you through. And then you can. I always have water in my bag. I don't think you're technically supposed to have water, but I always send it through the X-ray machine, and they always let me through. So it seems kind of scary. You got people standing there in military garb and everything, but it's really not that bad.
But ironclad security, clearly. All right, cool. That's good to know. And then when we actually get to the fair, we're going to be spending a full day there, right? So how do we do lunch at the fair? Is there like a cafeteria there?
Yes.
So there are plenty of food options at the Canton Fair. There are designated food areas that we usually schedule a time to get lunch at a specific spot on the single building side of the complex for the Sourcing Summit attendees. There's like Papa John's. There's a bunch of Chinese-style food offerings. I can't remember what else. There's a McDonald's
down there.
There's there's a Starbucks. So there's lots of different things. Bring cash. It's going to be pretty expensive. You might, if you're kind of picky about your food, you might consider bringing food with you. And something interesting, if you're going with the Sourcing Summit, you get a free breakfast every morning. But if you don't want to eat that, and Eve, let me know if I'm overstepping what they will do, but they generally will pack your breakfast for you in the morning and you can take it with you to the Canton Fair and just eat that as lunch. What do you think about that, Eve?
I think they let you choose if you want to eat at the buffet, or you can pack a little lunch box, some bread and fruit for lunch. You have that
Yeah,
option.
and the lunchbox is impressive. Let me tell you, it's pretty legit. So if you want to do that, that's fine. But then definitely, consider bringing your own food if you don't want to deal with going through the lines of, the Papa John's or the other Chinese microwave dinner style. It's basically a giant microwave dinner that one of these places has. It's actually pretty good, but it's kind of weird. They offer you either a banana or water. So I'm not sure exactly how that works, but it's a little funky. But it's not too intimidating or too hard to handle.
The one thing I'll add here is the lines. Do not underestimate those lines. I would say on average, I was probably waiting an hour and a half to 2 hours from getting in line to getting my food. If you're going with on the sourcing summit, luckily you're not going to be the person waiting in line. You're just going to arrive at a table and someone will have already waited in line for you. But certainly if you're going alone, just recognize that you're probably going to lose about 2 to 3 hours a day just to get lunch at the Canton Fair. So definitely good to figure that out.
We always go to Papa John's, and Peter, I always make Peter get it because he always has all the money. Like I said, he's my ATM machine. But Peter, what's the process for you getting lunch? Like, how does it work for you?
They just give you a little ticket, and they call it.
So what we normally do is we'll set a time we're all going to meet, like around noon. We'll tell you where to meet. I'll get in line. I order 4, 5, 6 pizzas. They have a vegetarian, a pepperoni, a cheese. We get sodas. We'll have it all ready when everyone arrives. If we need more food, we just go back. And the one that we found can get in fairly quickly. And if you place large orders, they kind of help you out. So we're able to get plenty of sodas, waters, and as much pizza as everyone needs.
And it usually only takes for us, if we go to Papa John's, like, 10, 15 minutes to get our order?
Yeah, it's not too bad.
But if you do go to there are more popular places, like all the suppliers and their factory representatives will go to like the more traditional Chinese places, and that can get really, really long lines. So it depends on what your palate wants.
And I wonder if are there multiple Papa John's in there?
Yes, there are multiple places, and we found one that's in between 2 levels, so it's not as well known.
It's really hard to find, but if you find it, you're golden.
So you guys have a secret Papa John's. Yeah, I was going to the main Papa John's across that Starbucks and waiting a good 2 hours a day. so definitely go with the sourcing summit trip. These guys know the hacks. Cool. All right, well, that covers the food. And obviously, like, if people outside of the group, if I just want to, head over and grab an ice cream cone or something, there's all sorts of little kind of vending machines, little cafe-style stores, right?
Yeah, so the ice cream is a little bit of an inside joke with me and Peter. We get at least 1, maybe sometimes 2 ice cream bars throughout the day, and it became kind of a thing for the Sourcing Summit trip to kind of laugh about that. But what?
You also had it for breakfast at the Ritz.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You doctors eat healthy, huh?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I go crazy when I'm on vacation, right? If I'm on keto the rest of the time. But yeah, there's lots of little vending places and little stands that you can get something and everything. So yeah.
All right, cool. That makes sense then. And obviously they have Wi-Fi at the fair. I'm assuming, asking you guys, they have Wi-Fi at the fair. Our phones are going to work as long as we have that SIM card in place. And can we actually get SIM cards at the fair if something goes terribly wrong?
Yeah, so a little about connectivity at the fair. So yes, they have Wi-Fi, and typically the Wi-Fi password is your badge ID. You can go to the information desks to actually get more details about logging into the Wi-Fi, but it's very, very hit or miss, which is why I not last time, but the time before, I brought one of those little Wi-Fi hotspots to use myself to actually do product research on the fly when we were looking through booths and everything. So that's one option. You can use Wi-Fi at the fair. The other option is you can bring along a Wi-Fi hotspot. And then the third option, of course, is to use your cell phone. And if you used our advice from the pre-China stuff, you're already set up and ready to go. But if you do need to buy a SIM card while at the fair, there are several booths usually located at the periphery of the fair, near the entrances in the main hallways. And we actually have some video. I'm not sure where we'll post that, if it's just going to be in the course or if it'll be public. We have some video on exactly how to navigate your way to those cell phone SIM card booths, and they'll take your passport number, and you'll pay, I don't know, like 130 RMB or something to get the SIM card prepaid, which is sort of why we started moving towards just getting the international data plan, because if VPNs perhaps might be starting to become restricted or illegal in 2018, we don't necessarily want to have our passport number tied to a SIM card whenever we're using the internet in China.
Yeah,
so
makes sense. And you said something there that I want to talk more about, Ben. One of the awesome things that you guys have done with Sourcing Summit is this is how done for you it is, right? You guys literally take videos of you guys walking from, say, the Ritz to the Canton Fair or something. You have a walking strategy within the Canton Fair. So it's really cool if you're on the trip, you get to see these like time-lapse videos of how Dr. Ben and Dr. Peter are navigating this stuff.
Yeah,
but
let's
can you talk a little bit
about
about general walking strategy and how to attack the fair itself?
Yeah, you read my mind. I was going to talk about walking strategy because, like I said, like we all said, walking is crazy at the Canton Fair. You will log miles and miles and miles, and it can take a toll on your feet, on your knees, on your back, all these things. So that is one option of having one good thing about having a walking strategy, but also you want to make sure you don't miss anything and you cover everything in the most efficient way possible. So what we usually do, and what some really smart Sourcing Summit attendees have done in the past, they have mapped out specific sections that they wanted to go based on research that they've done on the Canton Fair website about specific products that they wanted to look at, but also you get a handbook at the information centers. You get a map basically of all the different sections in the Canton Fair: health and personal care, toys, home goods, kitchen. They'll map it out very precisely and give you like 6.2 is home goods, 7.3 is gifts and holiday items or something like that. And so you can go to these sections, and usually they're split into two subsections with a large walkway down the middle, a very wide walkway. And so you have a 6.2 that's split into two large sections. And what we will typically do is take one half section and go in a snake pattern. You know, start by walking into the section, you turn left, and you take a snake pattern in and out of all of the sections in 6.2 on the left side without crossing the main aisle. And then you get to the end of the half section, and then you cross over to the other half section and you zigzag in and out. And so this way, you don't. If you decide that you want to stop halfway through, you have a good stopping point. You know, you want to go get an ice cream bar, you got to go to the bathroom, you got to go to lunch. You're not going to remember exactly where you are if you're trying to zigzag both half sections at the same time. So we always recommend doing one half section first and then the other half section. So that is one good walking strategy, and make sure you take pictures along the way of the booths that you want to revisit.
Nice. And obviously, for those of you going on the Sourcing Summit, we have a couple days before the actual Canton Fair where we'll get together and talk about all these things and make sure that we do have a good attack plan. So, so you guys on the trip are already covered. But yeah, obviously, if you're someone that's not coming with us or going with a group, these are definitely things that you're going to need to think about ahead of time, right? And I think we've covered pretty much everything about the Canton Fair. I guess, now we've gone to the fair, we've talked to suppliers, we even talked about how we can get samples on that last day of each phase. I guess, how do we actually get home? How do we get back to the hotel from the fair itself? And is there any specific time that we want to leave?
Yeah, so I'm going to need Mark and Eve to jump in here in a second, or if Peter can remember or not. There is a specific section where all of the shuttles will park, and at the Ritz, at least, they give you a little schedule. You can see exactly when the shuttles leave at the end of the day at the Canton Fair. And they will usually, the last shuttle will usually leave like an hour or so before the actual fair ends, maybe a couple hours before the fair ends. So if you want to stay to the bitter end, you got to use the metro or taxi. But usually everybody's pretty tired out by the time the shuttle's ready to leave, and they'll have snacks, they'll have water, they'll have bananas for you to munch on while you wait and get back to the Ritz-Carlton. But what is it? 10 point something, Marky? Do you remember?
Yeah, that was where they put the place. So it's not always the same, but it is around 9.1 or 10.2, whatever. I mean, they'll give you the little card that has the map of where the shuttle's going to be, and whatever hotel you stay at, if they have a shuttle, they will give you some kind of reference where you need to go. So there's a designated parking lot. That's what you're trying to refer to, right? The bus parking lot.
Yeah.
Yes. So
it's usually on the lower level.
Yes, it's on the lower level where you have the access.
Cool. Well, I think that may be all the questions I have for you guys. I guess if we want to wrap this whole thing up, because we've talked about a lot of really valuable points here, I guess let's wrap it all up and give some parting advice from all of us to the people listening to this call. What is our parting advice for everyone?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just go ahead and go first. I think that going into this kind of without fear, like you'll be able to get through any hurdle that you come upon. A lot of the reservations that people have with traveling to China is the logistical issues, which is why we wanted to do this video. Is you got to get rid of those fears, those doubts, those barriers that are stopping you from going to the Canton Fair, and remove those decisions from your mind, remove those fears, remove those worries, those doubts, which is a lot of the reason why we recommend going to some place like the Ritz-Carlton, is because it removes those decisions that you have to make about the travel, about the transportation, about the food, about where, all these little things that can add up. It's decision fatigue, right? You only have so many decisions that you can make during the day, and this is a real phenomenon. Once you hit that barrier of decisions that you're not built to make any more critical decisions during the day, then you start making poor decisions. You start making mistakes. You start making errors in the products that you need to source if you're at the end of the day. So try to set up your trip in a way that you eliminate all the extraneous decisions and things you have to do outside of sourcing your products, because that's what you're there for. So if you've got to spend a little bit more money to get into the Westin maybe, or maybe the Shangri-La, or maybe you want to come with us on the sourcing summit to eliminate all your decisions, that is going to pay you back tenfold when you finally found that product, when you've negotiated with that supplier, when you've made that relationship, because you didn't have to make all those extra little tiny draining decisions every day. So think about that when you're setting up your trip. It doesn't matter if you go with us, but just think about that when you're setting up your trip, because that can make the world of difference.
Yeah, great points there. And I mean, decisiveness is one of the most critical elements of entrepreneurship in business, right? So whether you're going to do this or not, make a decision and do it, right? Because every single person on this call right now, as you've heard, is a pro when it comes to this stuff. But we were all in your shoes not very long ago, right? We all had not been to China at some point. And how did we figure this all out? Well, it was running into the obstacle over and over again until we figure it out. And you can do that too. So whether you're going with a group or going by yourself, just make the decision and take action and take that step forward, because that's the only thing that's going to do it for you. Any other parting words? I felt like Ben's was the best. I probably shouldn't have even said that, but but if anyone else has any parting advice.
Well, maybe we can rearrange this a little bit. But I feel like Mark probably has a lot of experience with people coming to the Canton Fair and just kind of not really making the best of it. You've seen people just come in and wander around and leave without really doing much. So what advice do you have about making sure people really seize the moment and take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and get the best out of this trip.
As well said. I think what you said earlier was already perfect, but I'd like to just add that I've had a lot of friends that come out here, and they've been sourcing for many years, and actually when they came to visit and hanged out with me, they realized they haven't seen like 80% of what Guangzhou has to offer, so they were surprised as well. So that's the benefit of coming with a group like ours, and knowing that you have somebody that has the experience as well as the connections to do things that are more than just what one would expect. There's a lot of things here, and we welcome you to come to China because it's a great place. But I mean, I don't know. I just threw myself off by just talking about that. But you know what I mean. I mean, sorry. I think you probably have
so good. That was good. It was good up until then.
No, we got a lot of good stuff we can use there.
Yeah,
okay.
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, go ahead.
Well, go ahead. If you have more to say, go ahead.
Jump in.
I am ready to outro as well whenever you guys want.
Yeah. Let me just jump. I'm gonna lead into some things for Dot and Peter, and then we can outro with you.
Okay.
Okay. So Dot, you had your first experience with the Canton Fair last trip. You've been sourcing products online with our company for quite a while. And what would you say the experience is like coming to the Canton Fair for the first time, and really just diving in and talking to all these suppliers? Were you overwhelmed? Was it what you expected? Did you ever feel like it was like too crazy? Like what was your experience?
It's definitely a big place. So I'm an introvert, so being around that many people can be overwhelming sometimes, but also it was just a lot. I saw a lot of opportunity just because there's so many different products and different people to talk to. One of the main differences between sourcing online versus sourcing in China or wherever you're going to source products is you get to actually see them and hold them in your hands and know what you're getting, because at a big fair like the Canton Fair, you're going to have consistent manufacturing and stuff. So you're going to be able to get ideas just by being around all the different products, and you can see maybe one product you liked at one booth could be modified a little bit, and you see the version that you like at another booth. So there's just a lot of different opportunities when you're there in person, because you can see and touch and feel the products that you're trying to find instead of just looking through a computer screen. Also, you're talking to the people directly instead of just through chat. Like, you're seeing someone face to face. So face to face interactions are also going to be more positive than just messaging with somebody online. So that's my little rundown.
Yeah, I mean, really, really great points there. I think a lot of people could benefit from face-to-face interactions with their suppliers. Now,
Yeah.
Peter, I want to ask you this for a second. I'm gonna start with the first question about not specifically the Canton Fair, but in factory visits and Yiwu. Let's start with factory visits. What are your final parting words about how to make the best use of factory visits if you get the opportunity to meet a supplier face-to-face that you are looking to grow a product line or start a new product that has a lot of features that you need to modify, or some things that you need to meet with them face-to-face?
So the first thing, if you're going to meet at the factory, you want to make sure that you want to do business with them and it's worth your time. Because the factories, they'll say it's in Shanghai or Guangzhou, but really it's 3-4 hours outside of the city. So you're going to take half a day to a whole day of travel to get out there. So you want to make sure it's worth your time to go out there. You don't want to just start by visiting factories to look at products. But if you do know you want to really work with them, by going out there, you want to know about their factory. You want to know what product lines they have and what you want to expand into. And so that's one of the advantages. If it's a larger factory, if you're selling product A, they're going to have 5-6 other products that go really well with your product line. And they're going to be able to show them to you, and you want to know what specs and what quality of product you want ahead of time. So you can tell them, I'm looking for this, this, and that, but I don't want it to be this color, I want this. And you're really in like an hour or two going to be able to make your perfect product that if you're doing it back from home, it's going to take you weeks to months of back and forth communication.
Yeah, you know, that's a really good point. You don't want to just go into factory visits blind, just randomly connecting with factories and trying to visit them. You got to do your research. Just like you do product research, you got to do factory research. You got to find out what these people are all about, what their catalog offering is, what their prices are, what their capabilities are in modification and output of you know, and the number of units that they can do for you to see if you can actually scale with these people. So those are really important points about factory visits. And just to wrap things up for Peter, you know, Yiwu has been a really hot topic lately, these wholesale markets. What would you tell people who are trying to make a go of it at Yiwu? And you know that we all know that we recommend going to the Canton Fair, and we've kind of moved away from Yiwu, but there are people trying to go to Yiwu. So how are they going to make the best of their Yiwu trip and get the best ROI out of their trip to Yiwu?
If you're going to Yiwu, like a lot of people will talk about how you get cheaper products. You'll be able to see more things with a lower cost. It is true that you can get cheaper products in Yiwu, but it's all relative. The more you're willing to pay for a product, the higher quality you can get. The less you want to pay, lower quality. It's all based on what type of raw materials they use and quality. In Yiwu, you're going to want to be very careful and make sure that your factory is going to be able to keep producing at the same quality. And if you need to expand, they're going to be able to expand with you. Yiwu is great if you want to test a product like a concept. Will this work? But if you want to expand your line, you're probably going to run into some difficulties. But you can always start at Yiwu and then try and find a factory later if it starts taking off. But I will give a warning, like we have a great product that sold great. We're not able to source it anymore consistently due to some quality issues. So it put us back in the expansion, probably the latest 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, it definitely did delay us. And to kind of sum that all up, you got to be more careful at Yiwu. You got to be more deliberate in checking everything that your potential supplier says, doing quality checks, getting inspections, and really you got to start thinking about moving outside of Yiwu and other wholesale markets once the product has proved viable. So that's kind of the gist of the Yiwu market. So Will, I think we're ready for a kind of a general wrap up here to top off the, what is that, 2 hours and 15, is it 2 hours or 3 hours and 15? I don't even know anymore.
Yeah, I don't even know, but there was just a wealth of information shared here today from an incredible group of people. So, I mean, just to wrap up, I mean, you just heard from the panel of all panels when it comes to going to China or the Canton Fair. So thank you all for being here. We have myself, Dr. Ben, Dr. Peter, Dot, Mark, Eve, Mark Ramos, Eve Zhang. Really, really valuable session. I think, thanks so much for putting the extra time in for this too, because I think this is going to help so many people out there who are on the fence about whether or not they want to go to China. They're uncertain. They have some fear of all these different variables. And I think this call, although long, is pretty much going to be the masterclass for people who are considering a trip like this. So thanks so much, guys, for being here, because I think a ton of people are going to get a lot of value from this call.
Yeah, thanks for moderating and kind of holding, being the glue that holds everything together. Will.
I do my best. I do my best. So, guys, that is the I forgot what we called this. This is the expert panel on traveling and sourcing products in China. Again, be decisive about this. If you're still listening to this call, if you've made it all the way to the end, well, then you're probably right on the fence to go over to China. Again, it's going to take some decisiveness and some courage to get out there and do it, but this call right here is all you really need to get over there successfully. Obviously, we'd encourage you to check out sourcingsummit.com and look into the group experience as well, because Personally, that's how we like to do it after going to the Canton Fair so many times. But obviously that is up to you, and a lot of people on this call right now are actually going on the Sourcing Summit. So for those of you who will be joining at the next Canton Fair, looking forward to it, and feel free to post in the private group if you have any further questions. But with that, guys, I think we are about done and about ready to wrap up this masterclass on traveling and sourcing products in China. Anything else that anyone would like to add? Now is the time. If not, we'll wrap this baby up.
I think that pretty much sums it up. I'll see everybody in Guangzhou.
I hope to see you in China soon.
Welcome to China.
All right,
See the
good
pandas,
stuff.
right?
All right, I guess we have ourselves a call then. I'm gonna stop recording. I'm gonna stop recording.